I'd like to ask everyone to please take your seats. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of Finance and Corporate Services to order. We're going to start with the consent items. Can I get a mover for those? Moved by Councillor Ioannidis. Questions on any of the consent items? Questions on consent items? Councillor Gazzola.
I don't. There was an email that was sent out Saturday or something, and I've lost it. So I had some questions, but I've lost them. I wonder if I could get a copy of that email again. There's no rush before next week. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, very good. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. Those in favor of the consent items? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, we're going to move on to we have a delegation. Mr. Brad Bombach and Cheryl Zivkovich on illegal massage parlors. Good morning.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, just before we begin, I'd just like to remind you do have 5 minutes to address council. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
This is for the mayor.
Certainly the clerk will hand that out.
That was given to me late October. I don't know if you've seen it. I added the part in red at the bottom. My question, sorry, I assume everybody read the letter I gave to council about 3 weeks ago. And I'd just like an update to make sure that these places that are frauds don't get reissued licenses for next year. Is there anything being done about this for the 2014 calendar year? I went to Milton and they don't have any. I think it's a great idea. I'd just like an update, if it's possible.
Okay, so yeah, just the way this actually works is so you would make your presentation for your 5 minutes, and then council could ask questions and staff would discuss. So.
Sure.
Okay.
That's it.
So that concludes your presentation then?
Yep.
Okay, very good. Are there any questions of council? Councillor Fernandez, and I would remind folks that if you can ask any questions that raid into legal territory, we should go into caucus. Councillor Fernandez.
Actually, I'm just reiterating the question that the delegation is making. Is there some work that's being done? Are we doing some review on these on the issue that he has brought to the attention to council? Has he brought that to staff's attention as well?
That's a good question. To the delegation. Okay, pardon me. If you hold on to that question for one moment while staff thinks about it. Mayor Zaire.
Thank you. Yes, you just handed us a lengthy or a fairly thick document of pages of advertisements, and it appears, I can share this with everyone, it comes from a number of different sources, and some of them have the subtext Kitchener Massage beside a telephone number, and then others have a little bit more information. Can you tell me where this came from? And I see that it was printed on October the 21st.
People have come, I was given it. Number one, I was given this. They're kind of shy to come to council. I asked them to repeatedly. So I just brought it. I just added the red part at the bottom of the first page. So that's also what I heard.
So that you didn't prepare this?
No.
Then who did prepare
it? It was given to me.
Can you tell us by whom?
I don't know their name, to be honest with you. I've talked to them, and I asked them to come, and they were reluctant to appear. But I asked them to repeatedly come to council and explain it, because basically what happened was they lived in an apartment that had one. And they moved to another apartment that had another one. Agencies is what I'm talking about. They're everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere.
All right, that's my only question. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem.
So,
And back to Councillor Fernandez's question, did staff wish to
Actually, I'll ask a question to the delegation. So
certainly.
just for a point of clarification, you're talking about illegal use of the word massage parlor, massage business. Is that what? I read it, but I apologize. It was quite a while ago since I read your submission.
Basically, they're out of Toronto, and they're just flooding in this area. What I gave the mayor's there was, it goes a lot more in detail. I don't want to say it over. You guys can read it and look at it later. But it's a bunch of basic brothels that are everywhere. Like, it's a out of control situation. You start with one, and then it goes crazy.
Okay, so what you're finding and what you're hearing is that these are popping up in residential properties, like apartment buildings, under an assumed name or under an assumed business, and
Sorry. If it's a residential, they just put in their phone numbers up, and that's it. It's not a business.
okay.
It's not a declared business, so to speak. We're open for business.
Okay. All right. Then I have a question of staff and some direction I'd like to give them. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in, Mr. Bumbach.
Okay.
Okay. Councillor Fernandez, again, your question to staff.
Yeah. Are we privy to this kind of information is really my initial question to staff. And if we are we doing something to ensure that there is some policing or some licensing? And maybe if you can't answer the question at this time, then maybe I'd like to request some kind of report around the issue that this gentleman has brought forward to us, because certainly that's concerning if we've got residences who are in residential neighborhoods where there are children and families living, or innocent people living, and that residence is now being treated as a brothel. That may bring a certain element of unsavory people, or people who may be at risk of criminal activity. So I think that I'd like to understand a little bit further about what the delegation has brought forward to us today.
Perhaps if council has questions about the enforcement process, I could recommend that we discuss some of that in caucus. I can say that licenses for alternative massage parlors are reviewed annually before they're issued. I understand there has been some enforcement in 2013, somewhat limited compared to some other years because of some conflicting priorities in the enforcement division.
Alternatively, if I may, the councillor suggested possibly coming back with a report on potential options. That might be appropriate for this early stage, since it's not actually on the agenda and staff isn't prepared.
Okay. Well, I think that certainly we need, as a council, to understand what's been transpiring in the last year. If you're saying that there's been some enforcement, but it hasn't been, that there's some issues around enforcement, and if there hasn't been any licensing, or there's been, we know of businesses that are not being licensed, then maybe what would be best for us to understand is a fulsome report that will cover all of those areas. And then if we need to go into caucus when that report comes out, we can do that first, and then we can we'll be aware of what to discuss publicly after that. So I would like to ask for some kind of report with those parameters around them.
In the form of a motion, I'd take that.
That would be my motion. Yeah.
Certainly. Any comments or questions on the? I don't see any other questions of staff. So any comments or questions on the motion before us? I don't see any. Oh, sorry, Councillor Ioannidis.
Just want to know what type of cost that would cost for staff to come together with all that information in time.
Is that possible to get an estimate on any costs associated with preparing the report? Ms. Scher?
I think that within our resources, we could certainly prepare some information for council on different enforcement options. Again, I'd recommend that enforcement options be discussed in caucus rather than publicly. So perhaps a report could come back to caucus.
Okay, I think that would be, I think that at least that would be prudent. I don't think it's a costly endeavor, but I think before we can go further in discussion, we need to have some more information, and then at least we can discuss it properly in the right forum. I think that's with, all due respect to the delegation who's brought this information forward to us. I think he's at least entitled to know that we're investigating a little bit further than just listening to what he has to say.
Okay, very good. I'll take the question then. Those in favor? And opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, we will now move on to item number 6, the Downtown Financial Incentive Review. There are 2 delegates for this. Councillor Ioannidis.
I just want to declare my pecuniary interest as I property downtown.
Property downtown, very good. Noted. And Councillor Urbanovich, I see in the queue, is that for afterwards or now? No? After, okay. So first I would ask Mr. Larry Kosteff to come, or I also have Mr. Pupolo as well. Are you presenting together?
I wonder, Mr. Chairman, whether Cora Bloom could introduce it and then maybe...
Benefit of the presentation? Absolutely. Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps I won't go through the presentation I gave last time, obviously, but I'll just give you a bit of a recap just to remind you about the discussion we had in August in terms of the review of the financial incentives. The main conclusions that our analysis drew were one that in order to get a high quality new construction, whether that's office or residential, requires a fairly expensive construction cost, which at this point we've determined the market rates or the potential revenue that a developer could get downtown isn't high enough in order to achieve a high quality construction. And as such, financial incentives are one means of, an important means of making sure that those buildings could come forward and be built to the expectations of our design policies. The second element we looked at in the discussion paper was to look at our existing package of incentives and to determine whether they are suitable or not. And we've suggested a series of changes to those to make them more effective, and those are primarily what is laid out in the recommendations of the staff report. I think the critical issue for us is to make sure that there's much more financial certainty around a number of the incentives, and that the changes we're proposing would give us much more financial certainty. Since August, we were directed to do some additional public consultation, which we undertook. We put an article in York-Kitchener trying to make the content as easy to understand and engaging as possible. And then we also provided a web page with information trying to make it, again, easy for the general public to understand the issues at hand. We didn't get any formal, based on that additional consultation, we didn't receive any formal submissions. We did receive a pair of emails from members of the public just asking for more information, and we did meet with one gentleman, but that gentleman didn't put forward a formal submission either. Having said that, we've put the recommendations in front of you. I just wanted to reiterate that these are really council providing direction for staff to come back to you with formal actual approvals. So, for example, you're not actually approving the change to the parkland dedication policies today, for example. You're simply directing us to bring those forward to you, and there's some direction around the means in which we would do that. So nothing is actually changing today. You're simply giving us direction to come back to you with a series of reports and actions and bylaws to actually put those things into effect. So with that, I open to questions either now or after the delegation.
I think we see the delegation first, and Mr. Pupolo then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. Maybe you can just bear with me. I've got a bit of I think everybody's got this sore throat out there. My name is Paul Pupolo. I'm with the Polo Corp and iPlus Group, and I am here representing Fusion Homes, owner of 471 and 481 King Street. The total land area that we're talking about is just under 2.5 acres, just to give you an idea. Mr. Larry Kotzeff, also Vice President of Fusion Home, is also present here with me and to answer and respond to any specific questions you have, maybe from an ownership perspective. What I want to do is just take you through a bit of a brief presentation, starting off with the preliminary concept plan. This is the preliminary concept plan. I think a lot of you have seen it already. Phase 1 and Phase 2, we're looking at approximately 75 residential units for each phase, and that includes the buildings, the one building on King Street and the towns along Madison and along Madison and Cameron. So that is sort of the plan. And in Phase 3, of course, we're looking at the major tower, which would be roughly about 150 units. So altogether, we're looking at about 300 units altogether for the redevelopment of the site. We have been exploring a number of office and commercial space, and that would be incorporated into the two main buildings on King Street. The next slide, I think, is a very important one because it gives you a bit of an idea. What we try to do is capitalize what we call the financial model for residential and commercial prices, starting from Uptown Waterloo and ending up on Cedar. And as you can see, starting up in Uptown Waterloo, you have the red condos, the barrel lofts. You're commanding a price there of $375, $350, $350, $375 a square foot for the residential component. At the mid-block is what I look at is roughly about $300 to $325 per square foot. And of course, the Victoria is probably commanding the largest price range, and that's at $385 per square foot. The city center around $350, $343. Aero lofts $316, $325 in that range. Le Marché, you can see that as a major change as you get to the Market Square is around $230, and we're projecting for the Cedar East area around $230, $250 in that price range given today's market. Similarly, if you look at the one chart that we provided in terms of the commercial rates, you'll see the same sort of thing. Uptown Waterloo around $13.62, downtown Kitchener 10 to 11, Cedar around 5 to 8, and then downtown Cambridge, just to give you a comparison, you're looking at the $950 range. Again, this gives you sort of an idea of what the existing market is out there, and I think this basically is sort of replicates what the work that Corey has done, and then we took some of our own general real estate numbers in that area. Just to give you an update, since our August the 6th written submission, we didn't make a formal submission, but we made a written submission. Some of the updates from the August 6th letter to Corey and to yourself emphasized the following. Number one, financial incentives are still required in the downtown at this time, and we concur wholeheartedly. In order to attract a quality development and the price range, the incentives are still required as of today. Number two, areas around the Market Square and further down King Street East does need to gain momentum through the financial incentive program. Number 3 is a very important one. I think we need to link both the LRT and the downtown financial incentive packages. We're kind of looking at them, separately. Number 4, we agree that the development charge exemption and parkland dedication waiver should be continued. And number 5 is the major one that we want to talk about today, is the need for a more geographical focus for the implementation of the downtown incentives to provide economic enhancement in key areas. So moving forward, what we are suggesting is a more geographical approach based on a number of specific criteria. And before you is 2 maps from the city official plan, the draft official plan, and of course the LRT station map, which also illustrates in red the existing urban core area of the downtown area. So in terms of the criteria approach that we're looking at, we feel that it's very, very important. We feel there's roughly about 10 major criteria that could be looked at. One is the fact that it should be focused on a community and neighborhood basis. Number 2, it should align with the downtown vision, and specifically the Action Kitchener Plan of March 2012. It should conform to the official plan, to the draft plan, and specifically map number 3 that I showed you before, which looks at the urban structure. And you can see on that map that they have identified the 10-minute walk from each of those various stations, the LRT stations. Number 4 is that we should align the LRT stations and focus on areas within the 5, 10-minute, or 800-meter walking distance from the station, and also the regional plan for community improvement area. Number 5, we should focus on a geographical that would encompass downtown urban area and the LRT, so it would be one complete area. We feel that the criteria should assist in the redevelopment and growth of the Kitchener market. To me, that is a very, very important point, because the market, a lot of expenses have been paid in there, and I think that it's a very viable operation. We really need more sort of people to get it going and to keep it going in the next few years. Number 7 is we should provide a greater diversification from a geographical and housing choice point of view. Number 8 is should be focused on areas to gain economic momentum and sustainability. Number 9, it should provide a greater, sort of prosperity, in particular to the downtown east area. And the numbers, you can see that the numbers that have been from a square footage and a commercial use are significantly lower than other parts of the area. And last but not least, what we suggest here should be based on a cap to implement on a certain number of units sooner, or possibly put a cap of 3,000 units is what we're looking at, after which the incentive programs would be phased out. So that was the criteria approach that we were looking at. And what our suggestion to council and to staff is that to the downtown incentive report, that a geographical incentive area plan based on specific criteria and approach, and based on two areas. One, either on a specific time frame, i.e. 5, 6 years, whatever time frame, or a reasonable number of residential units. And we were suggesting 25 to 3,000. So if you look at there it is right here. The proposed geographical area for incentives is essentially what we're suggesting to council is the 10-minute walk, which would encompass the 6 LRT stations, as well as in red, your urban area of your downtown area. And what we're suggesting again is a cap for that. So in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, 4 major points we're saying. Number 1, financial incentives are still required. Number 2, the areas around the Market Square and King Street East need financial incentives. Number 3, we need to link the LRT station area planning with the downtown financial package. And fourthly, we need to implement a geographical investment program based on residential number of units. Moving forward, what we are recommending to council is to direct staff to look at and implement the above approach in their downtown financial review. Those are my submissions, Mr. Chairman. If there's any questions, myself or Mr. Kotzeff is here to respond to any questions you may have.
Excellent. Thank you kindly for your presentation. There are questions, starting with Councillor Urbanovich.
Thank you very much, Chair Davey. I have questions both for the delegation and for staff, and then at the appropriate time would like to make a motion. Mr. Pupolo, thanks for coming in today and for your presentation. Going back to the map that's in front of us right now, when you talk about a 10-minute walk, are you talking about a 10-minute walk from a single particular location, or are you talking about a 10-minute walk from individual, you referenced the LRT, from individual LRT stations along the area that you're talking about?
Yeah, what the map that is before you, the proposed geographical area, we've superimposed each of the stations, and we've done a 10-minute walk from each station, and then we did an aggregate map. So the map that is before you is the aggregate map showing the 10-minute walk from all 6 stations combined.
Okay. And you mean you've picked 2, 5, and 10-minute walks as the timeline. I gather at 10-minute walks, we're probably looking at somewhere between, probably depending on the person, 800 meters to a kilometer. How does that match with the numbers that were in the region's LRT station report?
Well, it does. If you refer, we go back to the map there, the urban structure map number 3 from the city plan, from your city draft official plan. That essentially mirrors up with that line as well as the regional maps.
Okay.
So I think that the map there, the area of interest or focus is essentially the area of the downtown, and that mirrors exactly what staff are looking at doing as well.
Okay, and so the 10-minute walk area from the Cedar Street station takes you roughly to where? Does it take you to Sterling? Does it take you to Ottawa Street or Borden? Or
I think not quite to Ottawa Street, but I think it goes past Betzner. Let me just look at the map here. It would be before Ottawa Street, undoubtedly. There's Betzner. Betzner would be about within the 5-minute walk, so it would just be before that. And I think Ottawa Street would be before, well beyond the 10-minute walk. There's no question about that. So it's in between Betzner and Ottawa Street.
Okay. Now I know some people have argued that in effect, the real entrance into our broader downtown or central neighborhood starts at Ottawa Street. Is there a reason why you didn't include I guess it would be the Charles and Ottawa LRT station as part of that?
Sir, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Is there, some people have argued that the entrance into our broader downtown or central neighborhoods starts at Ottawa Street, at King and Ottawa. Excuse me. Is there a reason you didn't include the LRT station at Charles and Ottawa?
I think I think the position has always been put forward that Ottawa Street and King Street area is sort of the entrance to the downtown, and should it be started there, you could probably do that by modifying that specific map by including the elongated area up to Ottawa Street. I think just from a pure planning point of view, it kind of makes sense because that is the front entrance, that is your front door when people are coming in off of King Street. So I think you would want that hopefully that enhancement and that improvement in that area as well.
Okay, that's all the questions I have for the delegation. And as I said, I have staff questions and a motion later on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pupolo, for coming in, and I know that we had met and talked earlier. When we talked earlier, you had given me a sense of what the cost would be roughly for per unit. I know you've given us floor space costs, and is that rental or is it condos?
Those numbers there, if I go back to this chart here, that's for condos. In other words, that's what per square foot you'd be paying at the door.
Okay, so just help me understand, if I was to come in and buy a condo in your building, I would be paying about $250,000 roughly, or base price would be? For a condo, if I wanted to purchase a condo in your building.
Well, let me just give you a comparison here. If you look at your red door, let's say 1,000 square foot unit, you'd be paying in the order of $370,000. That same unit at Cedar Street would be in the order of $250,000.
Okay.
That same unit at the Arrow Lofts would be a little bit less. So that sort of gives you sort of an idea of the magnitude of the numbers.
Right. So there's quite a difference in cost in it. Would you say that your development would be in a more affordable range than maybe the Arrow Lofts? Is that the market you're trying to target?
Maybe I'll delegate to Larry on this, but I think the Fusion Homes does build on sort of an upper scale area. I think we would have to look at the market and twin it. So there may be some smaller units, and then of course you would have your higher end units, maybe in your penthouse. So it really we'll have to look at the market. But right now, I mean, we at the rates we're getting at $250 a square foot, we probably would not be building for a number of years.
Okay.
Just because the market, there'll be no. You couldn't make a profit out of that at today's market.
Okay. The other question I had was related to the this landing pad grant, and it's for some renovations. But if you were to build your development, is that something that you would consider? I mean, looking at your preliminary concept plan, I'm figuring you're doing some multi-use, like a multi-use node here, so there'll be residential and there'll be business as well. Is that the concept you're looking at or not?
To be honest, we never looked at the launching pad. I mean, we could consider that in the commercial space as sort of an area, because there is certain part of it is that a commercial component, so we could look at it. As I understand, the launching pad was more retrofitting sort of second story building, part of the building, so not for new construction, but it could be used for your new construction as well. And
you're correct, that's my understanding as well, but I guess I'm just kind of throwing it out there that if you want to sort of tie everything together, if we have some launching pad, landing pad, launching pad, whatever word we want to use, in the mid-block area, why not have it sort of connected further down as well? And is that something that you would consider, or your client would consider putting into their space?
I think we would probably consider that. I mean, it'll all depend on what the rent is and how it all fits into the model there. But I think that's something that would be actually a very good idea to sort of distribute the launch pads not in just one area, but the whole area. Yeah, especially because the LRT station will be there. It would make a good connection. Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you very much, Chair Davey. Mr. Pupolo, you alluded to the fact you wouldn't be building for a number of years if this incentive was not extended to the Fusion Home area that you own. Can you give us a sense of when that would be? What triggers you would need to see in terms of the elevation of that area in terms of profitability?
Maybe I'll have Larry speak to that.
Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Graham, it will definitely hinder the timing. It'll be down the road a bit. I think, as Mr. Pupolo indicated, some of those retail prices on a square foot basis somewhat dictate when we can enter that market. And some of these projects would have to get built out with respect to the rates they're charging before we would be able to venture into the market prior to any kind of an incentive. On the flip side, we feel that with an incentive, with the DC exemption, as the city has in the community improvement area, that the timing could be advanced considerably to the extent that we have the proper zoning. It's now a matter of site plan approvals. We're considering 3 phases at this point in time. The first phase, about 75 units. I would suggest to you, if we looked at 2014 for the first phase site plan approval, servicing the site, we could look at a shovel in the ground in 2015, phase 1.
Okay, that's helpful. So it's a 3-phase project. So my next question is, you understand that these incentives wouldn't last forever, correct? That's one of your basic assumptions. When would you have phase 3 done in your minds, and would you want the incentives for that as well?
I think that the plan would be incentives through the timeline. Our estimate with respect to, say, construction of the 3rd phase, beginning construction of the 3rd phase, i.e. site plan approval, obviously serviced, and building permit availability. I would suggest to you that probably in a 5-year, 6-year phase, we would pretty well have everything, phases 1 and 2 complete, right. Phase 3 under construction for sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, I will also have some questions of staff later on, but I have a few for Mr. Pupo. That schedule you gave us for rents, is that the same one that you handed out when we met? Like you mentioned today that Victoria Place there is 385, and the schedule shows it at 362. Am I, one Victoria, yes. You said 385. Is it 385?
For what? I'm sorry.
For one Victoria.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. The reason I raised that, there are some units that are higher, but on average they're about 360. 360 is probably the right range.
Oh, okay. So I didn't misunderstand you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I missed on your parcel. How many acres of land did you say there are there? On your parcel.
2.5 acres.
2.5 acres. Would you tell me what you paid for that?
Pardon?
Would you tell me what you paid for that?
I'll let my client speak to that. That's part of the public record.
Yeah, I imagine it is.
How much you paid for it? It's part of it.
I believe it was in the order of $3.5, $3.6 million for 2.42 acres.
3.5 or 3.6. How much an acre was that?
Just
okay,
one.
I'll figure it out.
1.5, I think.
It's 2.42 acres.
Okay, I'm trying to understand your profitability. Okay, that's to carry on from the earlier conversation we had. In addition to land, what other? Well, let me go back to that good map that you show and all the different prices. Those values that you show there are today's market value?
That's correct.
It's not what necessarily the people paid to get in there.
That's correct.
Okay, it's today's market value. Okay.
Yes.
Just so I understand, like now up in the Bauer Lofts, let's say it's $365. What would they have paid to get in there?
I think they're all over the map. I think
they've probably gone up in price, though, right?
Yeah.
They would have paid less than the 365. Yeah. I just want to try to understand. Now the other thing, those are the market values. Now when it comes to building, the costs are is the cost price the same all over?
Depending on each site has got different characteristics. There may be a phase 1, phase 2 audit that would drive up the price or whatever, but the prices per construction, in the area would be about the same.
About the same. Okay, that's.
There may be some site anomalies or something like that that may drive the prices up, shoring up.
And I guess land could have a little different price.
Yeah.
Now, other than land and construction costs, what other costs are involved? What other costs for a developer? What other costs? I'm trying to come up to your profit. You want help from us? I want to know how much profit you're making.
I mean, the other components that go into the equation is your hard cost, that being your concrete, your windows, your packages inside. Also, your
Isn't
financing.
that part of the construction?
Pardon?
Isn't that part of the construction? Your
Yes,
hard-
yeah, oh, yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, no.
There's the financial-
We have your construction costs, and then what else do we have?
There'd be financing, there'd be marketing, the municipal fees, DCs,
Yeah, okay.
parkland dedication, your building permit,
Yeah,
approvals.
Okay, that's fine. So
Yep.
staff gave us those things, and I just wanted to make sure we're on the same boat, okay?
Oh, no, we are, yeah.
Yeah, so when staff were talking about a good quality building costing between 175 and 200 per square foot, is that where you are at?
Yeah, oh, yeah, I think those numbers are realistic.
So you're going to build a good quality building at 180 a square foot, right?
I think the ranges that I think are in the report are around 2.25, 175, 2.25 probably.
Well, actually, they were 175 to 200.
Yeah.
So
I probably would.
I'm going in between, 185.
Just from my own personal experience, I think 225 is probably a more realistic figure, but even if you use 200, 225 is not unreasonable.
Yeah, well, you got to be careful though, when you start putting those all together and you try to come down to the bottom line. The other question I kept bugging you with when we met was, what kind of a profit does a developer need to make? What percentage profit does a developer need to make?
You talk to the bank, they want a certain number. You talk to the individual because they like a certain risk factor on a project for a project to go ahead. The developer will have a certain number as well.
Well, what is you're the developer. What's your number? You're the one that's asking for the incentive. What's the number that you need to make?
Larry? 10 to 30.
In this particular area and the cost of construction and some of the questioning from Councillor Gazzola, to make the project successful, we need a DC exemption.
You're not answering my question. What rate of return do you need to make on your investment?
But you got to make something, and I would suggest with that you're going to be in the order of 5 to 10%, and it's a huge risk. Just wanted to also comment on one response that Mr. Pupolo mentioned with respect to the cost of construction. Again, the underground and structured parking that is required in the city to gain your parking spaces per unit, of course, is also a more significant issue as well. So that's part of your infrastructure cost too.
Okay, now but you've answered my question on the profit. You need to make 5 to 10%. And I listen, I don't argue with the private sector. You're not a church, you're out there to make money. And that's the way our economy works. I can't argue with that. I'm just trying to wrap my head around as to what is a reasonable profit. I hate to see the taxpayer providing incentives so that you can make a bigger profit. You mentioned that if the incentives don't go ahead, you'll postpone the development of this property. And you own the property now. Are you making any return on the property now? Are you making your 5 to 10% return on the property now?
No.
And you're going to leave it for another 5 or 6 years?
Well, we're collecting some rent, but at the same time we're financing it.
But you're not making your rate of return.
We're not making
why
our
would
rate
you
of
wait for 5 or 6 years?
Because of the risk and because of the fact that we wouldn't be able to get a reasonable rate of return if we put a shovel in the ground today.
But the rate of return today is lousy. All right. How far is your development from the LRT station?
It's within 100 yards.
So you're very close.
It's very close, yes.
So that's going to help, isn't it?
Yep.
That's going to knock up the market price.
I think we got to be careful. There's this misnomer that if they build them, the LRT will have this effect that it's going to automatically, people are going to build, because the development of high-rises and the development of downtown core is based on the economic and viability of the community as well as what's happening there. So it's a double-edged sword. So I don't buy. I think there is going to be some positive effect. Don't get me wrong, but I think it has to be properly tempered to look at what the economy is in your community as well as what is the incentives provided to create those opportunities.
I think you're right, but I'm just going by what by what the sellers of the LRT are telling me, okay? Just on, in your things that you need, there was item number 7, we said you need greater diversification. What does that mean? This is criteria that you're dealing with. What does that mean, greater diversification?
I think what we're looking at, if I can go to that number 7, I think it should provide greater diversification. For example, in the east side, especially King Street area, what we're looking at is providing a different type of housing for them, not only affordable but higher end or medium, so that the community does change and has a different demographic feel to it, and it would also create more opportunities for the creation for commercial uses as well. I know grocery store is the big issue for the downtown, and some good news is that there is a grocery store now at Cedar and King going ahead, although it's coming, from of 20,000 square feet, but still a larger grocery store of 25 to 30,000 square feet in the downtown area, whatever that is, I think would help that out. So what we're saying there is the greater the numbers are, the more diversification would provide the opportunity for an investor to come in and say, yes, we are going to put now a grocery store because we have reached a certain number of numbers or the cap.
And also then my last question there is relates to number 9. You said it should provide for greater prosperity. Whose prosperity are we talking about? Yours or the city?
No, I think it's a both. It's a I'm looking at it. That clause there was really mostly for the area, because the area does need a little bit of a shot in the arm, some incentives to get it going, and I think that's what we're seeing for that east side. We need some momentum to be created. So I think once the first person in is going to take no question, is going to be a higher risk, but as one goes in, a second one will come in. So I think what we're looking at is this prosperity of the whole east side and also the whole corridor of King Street down to Ottawa Street.
Thank you.
Councillor Yaneski.
Thank you. Mr. Puopolo, in terms of your presentation and in reading the staff report, you have met with staff and made your presentation. What's staff's position on your proposal?
We haven't really had an opportunity to speak to staff about it. I think we've indicated to them the general principles, but in fairness, I know that since the report has been available, unfortunately, Corey has been maternity leave or sick leave there, so we hadn't had a chance to go through it with him.
Okay. The boundary of this incentive grant stops at Cedar Street, and you want to extend it eastward. How far?
Sorry.
Sorry, pardon me.
Okay, the incentive program that currently is here ends at Cedar Street.
That's correct.
And you want it extended eastward. And I know you made your presentation about being located near the LRT proposed stations and going all the way down to Ottawa Street and the walking distance, et cetera, that was being discussed. But how far do you want the incentive line moved over down King Street? Just to as far as your property or further down? Like what do you think?
I think if you look at if you recall, our original position was a very site-specific one. We were just asking for our lanes to be included all the way up to Betzner. I think basically King Street, Charles, up to Betzner. Now what we're advocating, and we feel is a more realistic and a more balanced approach, is looking at it from a geographical area. And as you can tell, that the green line, the 10-minute walk, which would be well beyond Cedar Street, is what we're suggesting as an area that should be investigated for the incentive package.
Yeah, but that green area is basically a 10-minute walking area.
That's correct.
But the red dashed line is the
current
limits of the incentives. So that's the line I'm referring to, is the dashed red line. How far? I mean, I gather you'd want to have it moved at least 2 blocks to include your properties.
I think we're suggesting now to Councillor Janicki is the green line would be the red line now.
Say it again.
The urban boundary, that the urban area of the downtown would be changed to the green line, which is the
urban
10-minute
area.
walk.
So you're saying that red dashed line should now become the green line?
Yes, right.
Totally.
Yes. And as we suggested is that it could be done over, the program can be done over a phasing period, in other words, time, or you put a certain number of units on a cap.
Right. You mentioned
2,500 to 3,000. And the reason why we kind of looked at 22, there's really no magical numbers, but we were looking at an average tower being about 150. So that's roughly, 10 to 15 high-rise developments in that area. So one of the suggestions we're saying is once that cap has been reached, then the program would be phased out.
Okay. You have official plan and zoning conformity right now?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Would the official plan need to be amended to reflect the change of the boundary, in your opinion, to move it eastward?
No, I don't think for our development to go ahead, we don't need any official plan amendment.
No, that's not my question. I know you don't need it because you answered at the beginning that you're in conformity. But for the incentive grant, that needs to be changed also to be reflected in the official plan?
There is a next step that probably staff would have to go through that. Yes.
Okay, that's what I was leading to. So have you discussed, because right now staff is going through an official plan process revision, 5-year revision, and I'm just wondering whether you have been in any discussions with them in regard to the incentive program and how it affects boundaries.
No, we haven't been in that discussion.
Okay.
But I think the way I would see it is if the principle that we're putting forward is agreeable or has some merits, then I think basically council could be directing staff to look at that and look at the tools to implement that approach, and whether it needs various approvals, various amendments to maps, that could be done as part of that process.
Okay. I have some questions of staff also later.
Very good. Mayor Zaire.
Thank you very much. Philosophically, and you can apply it to this particular property if you wish, but what's going to drive the sales? Or what's going to drive the development of this property? Demand or incentives?
It's a good question from an economist. It's both. I think, in other words, if the incentives aren't there and the price point isn't there, the developers will not go ahead with the development. So it's a combination of both. The price point as well as the demand. There's no question.
Well, I can understand that, but I guess I'm trying to look at some fundamental rationale here as to, other than including your property and many other properties at this point in time, as your proposal would, there's a fundamental issue here of why we should have incentives either in the first place or continue to have them, and to expand the breadth of those incentives. Can you comment on that?
I'm sorry.
What's the fundamental reason why we should have incentives?
I think basically the incentive is if you're looking at to jumpstart or to get an area going, I think you need those. So that's number one. I think if you're looking to, and I think in this case here, the east side, the whole downtown needs that momentum. So I think that really is, the reason why you want to provide that incentive to keep that momentum going. I think if you remove them at this point in time, I think it will thwart development happening in the downtown. There's no question about that in my mind. Okay,
last question for you. And I also had asked this question of you privately as well. The issue here is that should we expand it, there may be an unleveling of the playing field. And by that I mean people have purchased properties inside the existing red line, knowing that incentives were in place, and therefore pricing presumably came into play in terms of the land. Likewise, those who are outside, pricing of land would have been taken into consideration as well. And if they weren't, knowing that incentives were not available, if they weren't, it was probably a bad investment. So I'm trying to understand, and maybe you could give some suggestions as to how we can continue to have a level playing field. Some would argue that it wasn't there now because some get it, some don't. But the rules were known. So if we change midstream, and your property or anybody else outside of the red line will have purchased properties, presumably at a value, knowing that incentives weren't there, and those inside.
And that is that's a very valid position. I think the only thing I would respond to that is, number one, planning is a very fluid thing. If you look at those comparables on those properties that we looked at, the Arrow Lofts was outside of the downtown area. So there wasn't an adjustment made to incorporate the Arrow Lofts. Number two, for example, Momentum, the development on Victoria Street. I mean, they exceeded the densities. I mean, this council approved a modification to approve another 2 stories. We didn't have a problem with that. That makes good planning sense. That's probably where their profit margins are going to be. So I think the rules do get changed, do get modified. I think the reason why we didn't go to the site-specific one, because of the criticism that you're favoring one over the other, this approach, in my mind, gives everybody a fair, balanced approach that they can come in. There's a certain time frame. Once the units are used up, or once a time frame, then that is, then everybody knows what the rules are, and then everybody can proceed on that basis.
I'm sorry. Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. I'm saying I'm sorry because I lied. I have another question.
I'm sorry, Carl. Can you just go to the phone? I can't.
I said I lied. I have one more question.
Oh.
In this case, you're suggesting it be on the basis of number of units as they get developed, a maximum number. However, could it be a combination of number of units and time as well?
That could work, yes. It could be a combination of both if you wanted as well. You could say a certain number of units by a certain time. Now, the only thing with time, though, is you have to look at it from a realistic point of view, because just to give you some time frames, to get approvals, you're looking at about a year. To build a condo or a high-rise, you're looking at about 18 months to 2 years. So you're already at your 3rd year. You allow 1 year for marketing for a condo, so you're into your 4 years for 1 unit. So you got to, from an economist, from the economics and marketing, you've got to be careful about timing to make sure that there is enough latitude for that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Etherington.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, Mr. Pueblo. I had a couple of questions. One is, in relation to, you say the East End, that part of the city badly needs a shot in the arm. We agree on that. It's in my ward. What makes you think that your development and, the associated everything we're talking about here, what makes you think that the development would be that shot in the arm rather than just LRT without your development? Where do you see the difference there?
I think the east side has got some amenities. I mean, you've got the markets, you've got Le Marché, you've got that hub there, and it just hasn't taken traction. So I think the way I look at it, just like the LRT, the more people you can get in there, more people in the community, it would change the whole feel of the community. So the more people you got walking up and down King Street in that area, I think it would be beneficial and would create those commercial opportunities. And I think then that changed the dynamics. And by providing, I think, the diversity of demographics coming into there, it would be very helpful. I mean, that area has seen a change now where it was a fairly older area. Yep. A lot of those people, unfortunately, have passed on, and now you're seeing sort of a mixture of areas. So do you bring in newer people, younger population, 25 to 35, which would hopefully will, gentrify or improve the area?
Okay. And my other question, as your development goes ahead, is there anything within that development that would benefit the people of that East End neighborhood?
Yeah, maybe Larry can speak to that. I think there is, we have some parkland. I mean, that's one of the things we're looking at. It's the streetscape, how it connects and a central corridor there for some park space.
Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Etherington, the intention is to inject the project into this area of town as a catalyst for a variety of activity. Obviously, we're looking at some retail commercial development at the base on King Street that would, offer some uses which we expect are not there today. Also, I think what would happen is that we're looking at porosity of the site so that there's a throughness of the site from King Street to Charles with an area in the middle as an amenity area that would be open to the public. And thirdly, and I think it would be an enhancement to the area, the reverse is true, whereby there are more people, say, living right downtown. There's more people that would be living in close proximity to the Kitchener Market. That, face it, people do spend a considerable portion of their disposable income in the vicinity of their home for, groceries and things of that nature. That I think that would be a positive spin in the reverse direction with respect to positive impact on the market.
Yeah, what's that particular interest in the parkland? And people, if I'm on King Street and your development is there, I would be able to walk through your development and enjoy parkland area?
That's correct, and exit on the Charles Street side.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd have just one question before we start taking questions from staff. It's about the cap, the idea of the implementing a hard cap. Would you have any concerns? I guess the intent of this really is to try and get development done as quickly as possible. So from your vantage, do you have any concerns? You threw out the number here on one of your slides of 3,000 units. Would there be any concerns if we adopted some sort of phased approach? So, for example, the first 1,000 units were subject to like a full exemption, whereas the next 1,000 units after that were approved by staff were at a lesser percent, say 70%, and then the final were at 40%. Would that be an issue?
I mean, that's another suggestion is, I know with the LRT stations, one of the things we were looking at is that maybe if you build within a certain time frame in the next 2 years, you get 100%. If you go, after that, maybe it goes down to 80 or 60, and then eventually it goes down to 0. So you could that's another way of doing it as well.
Okay, but you don't see any, without going back and talking to everyone, you don't see any significant issues of that from the development community?
We'd be interested in that approach as well, too. I think we were trying to tie it down to, I think what was really affecting us is the time, because of the time to build and market the condos, or the developments, which it takes you 4 years or 5 years. You want to leave yourself a little bit of latitude on that.
Okay.
But I mean, that's something we can investigate with staff. I don't think we have a problem with that.
Very good. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, questions of staff now. Councillor Verbanovich, you had mentioned you're planning to bring a motion forward. If you wouldn't mind getting some of the details in there so everyone can sort of ask their questions of staff at the same time, that would be great.
Sure, and I'll give some generalities, but my final motion may depend on some of the answers I get from staff in terms of going forward. In terms of the motion. I understand from speaking with staff earlier, or last week rather, there's some items of the recommendation that's in the report that are more time sensitive than others. And if my understanding is correct, we're talking in particular things like the landing pad program, the facade grant program, and so on. And so if I look at the recommendations before us, I'd be looking that we take clauses 2, 3, and 4, I think, in the report, and send that back to staff for some additional work based on some of the info we heard today and some questions that I have of staff. So before I speak to that additional work, I'd suggest maybe that we ask our questions and then we can go from there. Would that be reasonable? I'm looking at you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so with that, then I'll go into my questions. And I guess I'd start with I'd refer all of them to Mr. Bloom unless he thinks somebody else needs to help him out with them. First of all, Corey, just to be clear in terms of when we're talking about the development incentives, they aren't specific to any particular type of housing stock or infill. So it could be a series of brownstones, it could be condos, it could be a variety of things. Is that correct?
Through the chair, you're correct.
Okay. Great. So the next question I have then is, as we start talking about development incentives to encourage quicker development within those downtown neighborhoods, is our prime motivator that we're trying to get more people down there, or is it really that we're trying to create vibrant, healthy, well-functioning neighborhoods with certain amenities that are necessary in order to make that successful?
Through the chair, I would suggest it's a combination of both, that you get your amenities by attracting more people to the area, particularly to live in the area.
Okay, so it's a combination of both. Would it, in terms of doing that, when it comes to things like grocery stores and certain types of retailers and so on, do they look for a certain number of people potentially to reside within a certain geographic area that are either going to be able to walk there or whatever in order to locate, particularly in an urban setting?
Through the chair, most sophisticated commercial businesses will have some measurement that they need before they will invest, particularly something of the scale of a grocery store. They will all have their certain targets. They need certain people within X distance before they will proceed. So most will have that kind of a requirement.
Okay, so if that were the case, would it be reasonable to suggest that maybe one of the ways we should be looking at this whole incentive initiative is around possibly a per unit basis, as opposed to just a time frame, or maybe a per unit and a time frame combination? Because really what we're trying to do is create a certain kind of environment downtown or in the downtown neighborhoods within a certain period of time, and that means having certain amenities there, because it's almost a catch-22. So would a unit basis make some logical sense there? Because we could find out from retail experts, you need X number of people living here to get a grocery store. You need X number living here to get ABC in terms of amenities.
Through the chair, yes, and we do have a generally good idea through our GIS system of being able to calculate how many people live within certain areas. So it is conceivable that we could provide you information that shows both what certain businesses are looking for in terms of density and the kind of density that we have in place, and that would allow you to understand the missing number of units, for example, that would need to be built to get to a level where you'd get those amenities.
Okay. And in terms of, and I know we've done a lot of work in terms of the downtown neighborhoods, and we're certainly starting to see some economic success in terms of particularly some of the targeted areas that we've been looking at from an employment point of view with some of the tech companies and others that are locating down here. But is it fair to say that we're not where we want to be yet in terms of that broad overall vibrant healthy neighborhood in terms of that mix of live work play?
Through the chair, I would agree and make sort of 2 points. One is, yes, we don't have the density throughout the entirety of the downtown to get the kind of amenities that people in our community ask for, particularly a grocery store, movie theater, etc. And the second point I would make is that, there are, and I think we made this comment in the discussion paper, that there are parts of the downtown that are less likely to achieve intensification because of their circumstances than others. For example, we know the area around the new transit hub is more likely to attract development than, say, the area that Mr. Pupolo was discussing.
Okay, and that actually takes me to my I think my last question, which is, as we look at this, is it potentially reasonable? Actually, it's a two-part question. One, is there some merit to looking at a broader area that sort of melds together a number of our planning and economic development policies? So one that sort of melds together our planning policies, our economic development initiatives, as well as what the region's doing with LRT to create that vibrant neighborhood. And secondly, based on your last point there, does it potentially make sense to look at different nodes or different maps in terms of how we would incentivize development, recognizing two principles. One, that some areas are being particularly successful right now and maybe don't need as much help, i.e. the King and Victoria corridor. But secondly, we also need to have some sort of acknowledgement and respect for people's expectations around what's already in place if we look at making any changes.
Through the chair, I think the general principle that I would agree on is obviously more density within the downtown will provide better amenities. And how we get there is sort of what we're discussing. I would put two buts on that. One but is obviously the farther geographically you stretch those units, the less impact you feel. So, for example, if you can build 2,000 units within the existing downtown, that red line will have more impact than 2,000 units built within that 10-minute walk radius. So I just hazard that it's not just about getting units within the area, but but you want to obviously have more within a smaller geographical area will lead to more vibrancy. And then thirdly, it really becomes the other but is just it comes down to financial risk and how we manage financial risk as you sort of expand the boundaries and make it available to more people.
Mr. Wilmer, do you want to add?
Thank you. Just to add on this question or our concept of a unit-based cap, there is significant problems with implementing that. So I want to just describe a scenario that might unfold. If we adopt a unit-based approach where the first 1,000 units get an incentive and anything beyond that doesn't, we could foresee developers buying up land with the intention of taking advantage of that. And let's say the land that they purchase and make proposals on has the potential for 2,000 units. We would work through planning approvals. Maybe it's only site plan approval, nothing that even involves council. And those involve some technical studies, traffic impact studies, shadow, wind and snow deposition, those type of things. Some of those applications may be able to move quite quickly through the process because their supporting studies respond to all our guidelines and policies. Others may be more problematic and get sent back for revision and review. And so you might have somebody who applies later get their approvals sooner. And the amount of pressure that's put on the administration to ramrod through the early applications as opposed to dealing with them as they should be on their technical merit would be an absolute disaster. You would have people who bought land in good faith expecting an incentive not get the incentive. There's no certainty to the process, and the lack of certainty is a significant issue. Developers need to have some certainty before they buy land. People buy based on knowing where the red line is and knowing what the incentives are or are not. And part of the intent of Mr. Bloom's report, which I think may be lost in all the details here, is the overall intent that we're looking to phase out incentives, not to expand them, but that we're giving a generous period of notice on this, recognizing that the unleveling of the playing field would be unfair, that we're talking about saying now that in 2019 there may not be any more of these incentives. But to make overnight changes or something with a very short time frame will result in significant problems.
Okay, I'm a little...
And, sorry, Mr. Gear, do you want to comment as well?
I just, perhaps it's worthwhile just concluding that, because the point that I was going to make was on a slightly different tact.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Urbanovich.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure, because what we're hearing from Mr. Wilmer now is certainly different than either the questions asked today and the responses that we've heard from Corey, and also the ones that some of the discussions I've had with Mr. Chapman last week. I think at the end of the day, I mean, this is a report that's before us, and now council needs to look at it, needs to decide whether or not we're comfortable with the recommendations that are before us, and if we're not, potentially refer it back to staff to get some additional work done. I don't think anyone's expecting that to be done between now and next Monday.
No, and I'm saying between now and next June is a problem. If what you're doing is asking us to report back on the feasibility of a unit-based cap, I'm saying there's no point us even looking at it. It's a terrible idea for the reasons that I've explained. There's no certainty for developers. How are you going to know whether you'll benefit from an incentive or not? If you don't happen to get in under the wire and be in the first 1,000 units, you don't get anything, and then you've potentially overspent on land which you bought in good faith. We need to be able to provide certainty.
I agree with you, Mr. Wilmer, but at the same time, and I guess I think folks need to look at how this could be developed. I think for me, simply having, I don't, quite frankly, and I'm not going to get into a debate with you, but I don't think we're where we need to be yet. I think more work needs to be done, but I'm personally not comfortable with simply attaching a time limit to it. I think there needs to be more business rationale, the kind of rationale that comes around looking at how many units do we need in this area to make it a vibrant neighborhood. It's not unlike a developer that takes a large plot of land and looks at, I'm trying to create this vision of a neighborhood, and it involves residential and commercial and so on. We're doing the same thing here, and that's what we're trying to look at. And that's what potentially my final motion is going to be asking staff to look at going forward. So just going back to my questions, I think that in light of Corey's last response, I think that was the last question I had at this point, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Rear, do you want to comment as well?
I just wanted to respond to Councillor Urbanovich's observation that perhaps the incentive program was not yet required, or was no longer required along Victoria or at the in the station area for the multimodal station. I think that we have heard strongly from the development community that the projects that are currently in the hopper in the King Victoria area in the city center are moving forward primarily right now because we've got a favorable incentive environment combined with a steady growth in demand as a result of the strategy that Council's been implementing over the last 10 years. I would discourage an assessment that concluded that this area was at a point where we no longer needed those incentives. The economics the economics of new high-rise, high-density residential development in the downtown still remain tenuous, although they are strengthening for sure as the market matures somewhat. But the building projects we see underway right now and also in the immediate future are predicated on the incentive program that we have currently in place.
Well, and just to be clear, if I can just respond to that, Mr. Chair, I did not say that that area doesn't need incentives anymore. What I was questioning was, is it potentially real that it may need less incentives over time than perhaps other areas of the downtown due to see development, recognizing that we have to respect existing commitments and expectations that are there?
Yes, I think that this is really the essence of the proposed approach that we're suggesting. That leading up to the 2018 development charge bylaw, that we review the incentive package, particularly with regard to DCs, with a view to phasing them out. So our proposal is that this area is strengthening, and that with the implementation of the LRT and other growth in demand coming out, from our strengthening urban economy, we can definitely take a look at reducing those incentives over time.
Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I have a number of questions of staff, and I'll try to go quickly. And actually, before I do, I wanted just to acknowledge and thank Corey. I bothered him several times yesterday on a nice, quiet afternoon, and he was very good to get back to me with a number of answers, so I appreciate that. Can you tell me, have One Victoria and the Aero Lofts and City Center, are they all getting these incentives?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay. Do you have any guesstimate, if we proceed the way your report is going, what kind of dollars we're going to be dealing with? What kind of dollars are we talking about for downtown DC charges? Because these are going to have to go on the tax levy. So just a ballpark figure, if that's possible.
Mr. Chapman?
I apologize. Was the question to quantify the cost of this proposal?
Yes. Just the DC exemptions, yeah.
So if it was an exemption on 3,000 units, that would range from $9 to $12 million, depending on whether or not that is townhomes or multiple residential.
I'm sorry, did you say 9 to what?
Between $9 and $12 million.
Is the kind of dollars we're looking at then?
Based on Mr. Pupelo's proposal, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, that includes expanding the area? I'm just asking about the area as it now stands, without expanding it. What kind of costs are we anticipating over the next 5 years?
We won't know that until we conclude the development charges study. So that will have to come forward. It'll be a function of the capital costs and the rate of growth in the downtown. We have no idea, Councillor Gazzola, at this point in time.
Okay,
what that
I appreciate that. And I just wondered if you did have a guesstimate. This is the sort of thing we're deciding, and it would be nice to have a guesstimate. And I can appreciate that if you can't have it.
Sorry, if I may interject just on that point, but even when the development charge study is complete, we still won't know because it's open to the total growth in the downtown.
Through the chair, no, not based on the approach that's recommended here. We're recommending a change and, in fact, to revert back to the approach we took prior to 2009, whereby basically we would ignore downtown capital costs in the calculation and we would ignore downtown growth. So, for example, if there was a community center being built that had a 2% allocation for expected growth in the downtown, we would simply fund that 2% cost through the tax base, and there would be no uncertainty about our exposure over the next 5 to 10 years.
Very good. Sorry, please continue, Councillor Gazzola.
Okay, on page 6.3, you have some assessment figures there. Can you just give me a little more information as to what period of time they relate to and what's included there?
Through the chair, what we looked at were, you can see the 5 projects listed: Coffin Lofts, Eaton Lofts, the Regency, the Tannery, and the Synergy Center. We looked at the 2012 assessment, and we looked back in history to find out when what the assessment was before there was a significant jump because of reassessment, and that's really the comparison. So it will differ by project, because some projects, their reassessment would have happened in 2008, for example, where another would have been 2009. So what you are seeing is a comparison of 2012 assessment versus those projects pre-reassessment.
But that it could be a mishmash of, it's not comparing 2012 to the year 2000, and it's not taking the whole inside the red line area or anything. It's just 3 or 4 or 5 properties.
That's correct.
Okay, that's fine. Can you tell me what kind of incentives the city center is getting? From what I read on 6.4, we're looking at 2.08 million from the city and 3.35 million from the region, for a total of $5 million. Did they get a bargain on the land? Or what other incentives would they have received?
Mr. Aguirre?
Through you, Chair Davey, the Andrew Homes paid what was market rent or market rate for the land at the time. They are utilizing the existing incentive envelope, which includes just the planning and building permit rebates and the DC exemption.
So those are the only incentives they received?
As far as I know, that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're building 360 units, and that works out to a $15,000 per unit incentive. That's straight arithmetic, right?
Through the chair, yes, that sounds correct.
So who gets the benefit of that? Is it the developer? Is it the purchaser? Or is it possible to tell?
Through the chair, it's difficult to understand who exactly gets the full benefit. Certainly from the developer standpoint, that drives their overall construction cost down by that $15,000 per unit. Where that factors in and who benefits, whether it was the seller or the developer, probably differs on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Mr. Aguirre, to add?
Through you, Chair Davey, I would suggest that as City Centre is not achieving the market rates that you would see, for example, in Uptown Waterloo, where currently prices, as are demonstrated by the delegation earlier, are running in the $370 range per square foot. It'll be some combination of the developer and the property purchaser, the buyer, that will be benefiting from that. Certainly, the prices for construction, as has been discussed for top-end units, would be almost identical. Our market construction prices and marketing prices would be similar, but clearly the city centre properties are coming in at a discount over what is being sold in Uptown Waterloo at this point.
When we look at this whole incentive program, we're looking to encourage more people into the downtown. Where will these people come from?
Through the chair, my best assumption on that, when you're looking at multiple dwelling type construction, so 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, typically these are of certain demographics. Typically they tend to be either young professionals who don't have kids yet and don't need a large space, urban families who can live in a small space, although that's typically rare. It tends to be empty nesters who kids are gone from home and they're now downsizing. It can be seniors, and we're also seeing a lot of growth in the market of recently divorced or separated couples who are now on their own. Those tend to be the typical purchasers of a downtown condo unit in a multiple building.
Okay, I guess what I was driving at, though, the bulk of them will be new people to our community?
Through the chair, it's impossible to tell. I would suggest it's going to be a mixture of both. There will probably be, for the next, I would say, 5-6 years, it would be predominantly people who are within the community or have come through the University of Waterloo or Wilfrid Laurier and are first-time purchasers.
So they're new people to our community, though?
There certainly will be some of that will be new to the community, yes.
Okay, so I'm trying to get to deal with, who pays for growth. They're going to be new people to our community, and we're going to incur costs in our community because of them, other than infrastructure in the downtown. Is that not the case?
Through the chair, yeah. It's hard to understand what percentage of downtown purchasers are new to the community, but yes, the assumption would be that there would be a percentage of that are new, and that there is a cost to that, obviously.
I just want to delve a little bit on this expansion of the borders, and I want to refer to page 633, where you previously responded to people that wanted to expand the boundaries. Can you just expand on what you say on 633? It's something about to move the line, where do you move it to, or sort of that?
Sure. Through the chair, yeah, I think under the proposal where if we disregard the thought of a unit cap, and maybe even with the unit cap, no matter where you draw the line, you will always have somebody on the other side of the line wanting to be included. I think that is inevitable.
And so you can't do that?
I think the question becomes, what are you trying to achieve within the boundaries that you set, and what's the financial risk involved in doing that? And that becomes both a policy decision and a financial decision.
From what I understand, it says, you can almost move the line beyond Ottawa Street. You can just keep moving that line.
Through the chair, arguably you could go into the edge of the city before you'll find, and maybe even beyond, where people will always be somebody on the other line wanting to be included.
That's why I would like to move the line to the City Hall. I want to just deal now, the main concern I have, and you, is giving developers this assistance so that they can attain a certain level of return on their investment. I went through your scenarios, and I'm trying to quite understand them, where you talk about the components that the developer has to deal with. There's the land costs, there's construction costs, there's financing and carrying costs and legal things that add 15% of the construction costs, and then there are design costs. Is there anything else? Have I missed anything?
Through the chair, the only other real fee is fees that they pay to the city, whether that's development charges, building permits, etc. Otherwise, what we've included in our scenarios were all of the costs that are typically normal. We did not include environmental costs because those differ from property to property, so remediation costs. But in our scenarios, we've included all of the typical costs that you would incur on a normal given site.
Why wouldn't permits and all that be included? Why would they not be included with financing, legal, marketing, and sales costs? Well, but you say they're not included. The only thing that isn't included is the fees that come to a government.
Through the chair, in the scenarios, we included all those costs. So the permit fees are included in the scenarios. I was just adding on to your list of what have you not caught.
So those are all included in your figures?
Yes.
Okay. Now, here's my dilemma. I go through an exercise based on 300 units, 900 square feet a unit, and I looked at all three construction costs: $165, $180 in between, and $200. If I look at the in between one is $180, that should be a fairly good type of building. If I look at all of those, I see that the developers are making their 5 to 10%, 7.5% profit, return on their investment. So why do we have to give them more money to bring them up to a 15% return on their investment? That's what I can't get into my head. I don't want developers to be doing, and I know there's risks, and you take risks. You gotta get paid for that. But I can't get it into my head as to why we need to throw in some incentives so that they can make more. Am I out to lunch?
Through the chair, all I can say is if you refer to page 6-18, what we tried to use was industry standards to include the full cost of development, and the variable elements really was the cost of construction. And so the line that you see, the blue line, is our calculation that if you include 15% of profit plus all of the land costs, development costs, legal costs, etc., if you put the full cost in, that, for example, at $179 a square foot, in order for them to achieve their 15% profit, they need to sell their units at $331 a foot. So that was our calculation based on industry standards.
Mr. Regier to add, and I will remind Council we are about 15 minutes behind over schedule at this point. Mr. Regier to add.
Just very briefly, I think the bottom line here is that the incentive, the fact that we are now getting two major developments under construction in the city for the first time in probably 12 years demonstrates the power, the importance of those incentives at this point. We really have not seen any new construction in the downtown since the Regency was built. We've had an apartment built on the other side of the downtown, but we have had no new condominium or apartment building right in the downtown. And the simple my simple observation from that is that the rate of return has been inadequate given the potential price of the units and the cost of construction and land up to this point. Now we are seeing some significant a change in the demand, driven by a change in the brand of the downtown. We've become known as a high-tech hub, a creative economy city. We've made a significant investment over the years to change the way the downtown functions, and the result is a couple of significant projects, but it's really taken us a long time to get to this point.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I have a number of questions on the landing pad, but I'm going to leave them. I would like to make a comment near the end, but Just one final question. And I think I asked this before, but can you give me some guesstimate of the numbers of dollars that we have spent in the downtown in the last 5 to 10 years? If you want to leave that, well, this is going to come back. I leave that as a question for you, okay?
Sure. The only point of clarity I'll say I can give you the incentive number that we have calculated. That since 1995, the amount of money we have spent on incentives to date is $3.65 million. That's simply the incentives.
No, I saw that, but no, I'm wanting to know how much we've actually spent in renovations to the downtown, to the immediate downtown area. The numbers of dollars that we as a community have put into that. So that's something I will leave with you, okay? Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. That actually leads right into the similar question that I had as well. And I'll use that as my springboard question. In looking at the $3.65 million, those were incentives, but that would not include the EDIF funding that has been pumped into the downtown in the last 10 years, right?
Correct, although some of those incentives were paid out of EDIF, but yes, the EDIF, like King Street Streetscape, School of Pharmacy, for example, are in addition to that 3.65.
Okay. Sorry, just let me make a note of that. So you said the School of Pharmacy and the Streetscape came out of the EDIF funding?
I was just using those as an example that, yes, to your point, most of what was paid out of EDIF would be over and above the $3.65 million.
Okay. Just a question on the sort of the presentation from Mr. Pupolo and his client. Is it possible, and this is not saying that I'm encouraging further expansion of the boundary, because I'm not sure that I really would like to see that yet, but is it possible that we're in some way penalizing anybody outside of that red boundary because they may not be bringing in the same amount of revenue that, for example, city centre units will or momentum units will?
Through the chair, I'm not entirely. Could you restate the question for me?
Sure. So the city centre, based on the figures that we have, the city centre and the momentum, we're looking at $300,000 to $350,000 per unit, for example, right? Looking at the numbers that we've gotten from Mr. Pupolo, this area that he's speaking about is talking about $200,000 to $250,000, which of course we would see a significant difference in tax revenue. So are we saying we want to incent the areas that are going to give us a higher tax revenue, but not necessarily the areas that are not going to generate as high a tax revenue?
Through the chair, I don't think that's quite what we're suggesting. I think historically what we've suggested is that the downtown needs assistance, and we drew that red line around what we determined that to be, and that those incentives would help to incur greater benefits, not just taxation, but intensification, et cetera. And that's really the goal, was to focus and incent and encourage development within that red line.
Okay, and I thank you. I do understand that. The line was drawn because you saw that area as an area that required a shot in the arm, as Mr. Pupolo suggested. His area requires the same shot in the arm. And maybe this is sort of a rhetorical question, and maybe you can't answer it, but and maybe Mr. Wilmer would be better to answer it, because I'm kind of puzzled as to why developers need to have that level of certainty and incentives, because really when any developer buys land, they're buying it on speculation. And it really, what the market will bear is what the market will bear. I mean, if any business owner would say to you, it's about supply and demand, and it's about marketability, it's about what I said originally, what the market will bear. So if we're giving incentives similar to a business giving incentives to a client to purchase their product, are we not skewing what the market will actually bear and what the market will drive?
Through the chair, one way of looking at it is if a developer picks up a property, they immediately incur costs, and they will incur costs on professional fees, legal fees, etc. And I think what Mr. Wilmer was referring to in terms of certainty was, in order to incur those costs and take on that risk, they want to know that they have a certain deadline by which they need to build, or they lose those incentives. So it's far more predictable if it was a date set in time that they know they need to build by 2019, for example, or they lose it, versus I don't know if in 2019 the city will still be offering the same incentives because they've already built 2,000 units and they've changed the rate. I think that was sort of the point that Mr. Wilmer was trying to get at, that that would provide significant a lack of security on the developer standpoint to know what it is that they will be paying when they actually get to the point of permits. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of. It does. I mean, you're talking about 2019. That would be the sunset limit of incentives. But we're in my opinion, in essence, creating a sort of a false, and I stand corrected, but a false sense of what the market will actually bear, and what the market will drive. I mean, if there is, let's for example say if the city centre did not have those incentives, maybe they wouldn't have developed, or maybe they wouldn't have developed as large. But that would actually be a real picture of what the market will bear and what the supply and demand situation would be. So by giving them incentive, we're encouraging them to develop, which sounds all wonderful and fine because we eventually get the tax revenue down the road. But how does that sort of makes it difficult for other businesses or developers? And I don't support the whole thing that we should be giving them certainty, because if you want to buy land, there's a cost of doing business, there's a cost to developing, and you bear that risk when you buy that land, just like anything. So, I still have a real problem with incentives. I think that we really need to be, in some sense, to be kind of done with them. My other question was...
Okay, at this point, too, I'm going to remind council we have to get questions before comments. We got to move along here.
Sorry, I want to wrap them up. I'll wrap them all up together so I won't come back.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry. Just looking at my scribbles here. Okay. I don't think I actually have any more questions. I apologize for holding up, council. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Regier, do you want to add?
Just very quickly, I think to respond to the last question, the councillor is correct that we offer incentives to change the dynamics in the market, and we offer the incentive to achieve public policy objectives. In this particular case, we are incenting investment behavior in the downtown, which we felt as a city needed to be strengthened. We needed more people living downtown in order to achieve our economic and our social objectives, and our environmental objectives as well. So that is correct. We are interfering with the normal dynamics in the marketplace to achieve a city building project.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Chair, for allowing me. I did remember what my other question was. Is if we were to de-incent greenfield development, would that not be a natural incentive for inner city or already established neighborhoods and areas, not necessarily downtown, but let's just use Mr. Pupolo's map, for example. Would that not naturally incent people to developers to build? because there's less incentive to build out in the outlying areas? And that may be kind of a philosophical question, I don't know, but...
Through the chair, I would just suggest that at the end of the day, for developers, it all comes down to economics. And if there are circumstances in suburban areas that don't allow them to make their profit, they're not going to build. They're going to go where they can make their profit.
Right, exactly. Okay. So once our development charges study comes forward, that may actually be a de-incentive to urban sprawl. Okay, thanks.
Councillor Yaneski.
Thank you. In one of the recommendations, you make reference to...
Councillor Yaneski, one moment, sorry. Which point of order has been called? Mayor Zaire?
Yeah. It's not about any one individual here at all. I think that we're sort of all over the map on this one. And if we're trying to resolve parts of this today, we won't resolve all of it, I get that. I think that we need to have something on the table so we know precisely what we're talking about. We've got motions or a recommendation in front of us. Councillor Urbanovich has suggested something. I'm not sure I agree with it, but I want to know what we're going to be debating. If we then have then this brought forward, and then we go around again because we're debating it, we're going to be here talking on this item until mid-afternoon. That's my point of order. I think we should be focusing down on what it is specifically we want to be talking about and achieving. I'm not denigrating anybody because all of the questions that have been asked need to be understood. There's no question about that. But I think we're now branching out and beyond that.
I think that's a fair point. Actually, was my intent, and Councillor Urbanovich did bring some, but are you prepared to clarify before we continue?
Should be on the table.
I'll come right back.
I can do that, Mr. Chair. So the motion that I'm going to move is in two parts. So the first part is all of the recommendations except for paragraphs 2, 3, and 4.
Which, can you be precise? Because
so beginning with, so I'm excluding through the development of the 2014 development charge background study, that through the development of the bylaw, and that the mayor and city staff work with the region. So those three paragraphs I'm excluding in the first part of my motion. And so everything else I'm saying that basically is as written. In terms of those three paragraphs, I'm suggesting that we refer back to staff and to the DC study process, and staff can help me here. The development charge incentives referenced in the report, that staff look at the possibility of a couple things. One, a broader boundary that's reflective of the downtown neighborhoods and consistent with all of our various planning documents, including the official plan, the economic development plan, our downtown objectives, as well as the region's LRT strategy going forward, and to come forward with a series of recommendations that could be a combination of time and or unit-based in order to bring forward incentives for a period of time going forward. And if I can just briefly speak to this, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need that in writing.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's pretty clear.
It seemed fairly clear to me. So he's taking out only 3 paragraphs, approving the rest, those paragraphs 2 and 3, and just simply referring the DC back to look at a broader boundary.
Okay, I wasn't sure where the motion began, that part of it, and where it ended, because there was an explanation that was being given to it. So, and I'm not trying to be difficult here, but trying to focus exactly what we're going to be voting.
What I'm trying to do as well.
Okay. If you want to finish.
So if I can speak to it, Mr. Chair. I think at the end of the day, what to me is important is that we continue to ensure the development of a strong, healthy, core neighborhood environment. Whether that's that existing boundary or whether that's a broader boundary, I think is something that needs to be looked at. At the end of the day, this is the foundation of our city. And while we've made certain progress, I think all of us, or many of us, I've heard, feel in discussions that we want to see that continue to develop. As Mr. Regier said, what we're trying to do is bring about a change in investment behavior that's going to have economic, social, and environmental impacts. And I think as it's being proposed right now, it's not achieving that as fully as it possibly can. And so I'd like staff to go and look at that. I know in speaking with Mr. Chapman, he said maybe something that we could look at staff could bring back a report as part of the DC study. We can maybe look at a workshop at one of our strat sessions around this and have some further dialogue. But it's not at a point where it's ready to move forward today.
Okay, now in fairness, I'm going to get back to the queue. Councillor Yaneski.
Thank you. Before I ask staff for questions, in terms of comments that was made by Councillor Vrbanovich and Mayor Zaire, I see this is going to be a long-winded process that maybe should have been dedicated more time to or at a separate session. Because it's a whole big issue that we have to discuss with. There's been excellent questions here raised, and I see this going to be bottlenecked right now the way I see it unfolding. So that's just an initial comment. Question to staff, just basically a quick few ones. One of the paragraphs in the recommendation pertaining to the park dedication talks about discontinuing the downtown waiver and establishing a maximum 0.1.5 hectare per units, 300 unit basis. But discontinue the downtown waiver, you're saying that there's nothing being, as my understanding, provided right now in terms of any park dedication by the development?
Through the chair, correct. Currently, downtown parkland dedication fees are waived entirely.
Okay, that's what I want to. So now you're going to establish the 0.5 basis as opposed to the 5% park dedication?
Through the chair, no, as opposed to 100%. So in multiple dwellings, you calculate it based on the units as opposed to land.
Okay. When Mr. Pupolo was making his presentation along with Mr. Kotzeff on his request, are you going to be looking at expanding the boundary? I mean, when I read the staff report, you indicated that you've met, but you sort of didn't give any direction that what you're going to do with it.
Through the chair, our recommendation was to keep the line as is. Okay. And from what I'm reading from council is there's some direction for us to look at some other options. But currently our recommendation is to keep the line as is.
Okay, well then that answers some of my other questions there. A final question then would be, City of Waterloo has discontinued their incentive programs. Your line of thinking in terms of what's happening in Kitchener here with our issues here, are you sort of looking to see what happened in Waterloo as well in terms of their downtown area and how they have, what they've achieved versus where we are right now?
Through the chair, I think one simple answer is, yeah, and our numbers and analysis show it, is that they're at a point where development can proceed and they can achieve their profit without the need for a city incentive. And what our conclusion is that downtown Kitchener isn't quite at a place where that can happen. The economics simply aren't at the same place as Uptown Waterloo is right now.
Okay. Well, this is a hypothetical, not a hypothetical question. This is also a question that's been lingering in my mind. And I know that City of Waterloo have been quite successful in terms of their redevelopment of the downtown. Would our issues of concern be social services and the types of people that are catered to in the Kitchener versus in Waterloo as being maybe factors that are hesitant in allowing development to proceed?
Through the chair, I would say that was probably one of a number of issues, without getting into a full discussion on all those issues.
Okay, thank you. And I would have to just, for your direction, agree with Mr. Wilbur's comments on the issue of maximizing the number of units in terms of any incentive program. If you put it and people buy it and then you've used up the 2,000 or whatever the number is, that really creates a huge, huge problem that I see where he was coming from. And I think that should not be considered at all, but provided in terms of just the time frame.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, I just have one question, and it's with regards to development charges. And just, we all know that our development charge reserve fund is pretty depleted, and we have to look at that in the context of the review. I'm just trying to understand the correlation between the exemptions that happen in the downtown and the reserve being depleted. You know, we don't have the funds to build amenities out in the suburbs because the development charges aren't there. Is there a correlation there, or is it completely unrelated?
Mr. Chapman.
Through the chair, there is no correlation. Essentially, those development charges were paid, but instead of being paid by the developer, they were paid by the taxpayer.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. I think with regards to a lot of the discussion that's going on, I don't mind looking at different options with regards to development charges, with regards to downtown and looking at the boundary, but I think it's been noted that there's not a lot of time sensitivity around some of the clauses, and so I'd be willing to support the motion just to take another look at it, but at the end of the day, we may end up where we are today. So I don't have a problem to look at it, but I think there's a lot more questions that need to be asked and answered through that. So we may end up where we are, but we may go a different direction. So I'll support the motion.
Thank you. And lastly, Mayor Zaire.
Thank you. And just to be clear, with the motion that is now on the floor, yes?
It is.
Okay. So that ignoring the first two lines of the recommendation, clauses 1, 2, and 3 are being removed. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And the rest is there, and the balance being referred to study, essentially.
Right, with the addendums.
Okay. I want to, at the outset, say that I do believe that incentives are necessary and are still necessary. If I could just ask you to imagine the circumstance in what our city, not just the downtown, our city, what our city would be looking like today had we not had incentives in place that we had for the last number of years. It would be starkly different. Our financial circumstances would be dramatically different, I believe. And we are financially sound in this city, and we were setting something in place for the long term. Had we not had those incentives, it would be we would not be seeing the kinds of development that has occurred in the downtown, which impacts everything else that is happening within the city, whether it's out in the suburbs or within the core. I believe that we need to have some form of incentives continue for a period of time. I'm not certain of that time yet. But what I am certain about is that there has to be certainty in what is available. It cannot be left to, and this is speaking obviously to the time and or the number of units. I am yet to be convinced that the number of units in itself, without some other measure attached to it, and I don't know what that is a good idea. We need certainty because without it, you are dealing with the private sector in bad faith. Decisions are made, and yes, there is risk, and business people know that there is risk, and that's why they are able to make a profit, or in fact, lose. So I believe that, and making a profit is not bad, folks. It is what drives our economy at this point in time. But, as we know, it does require incentives from time to time. It's important that we deal with people in good faith. And that goes back to my the background to my question to the delegation earlier. What about dealing in changing policy midstream? So it has to be in good faith. Speaking to the specific motion, if I heard Mr. Chapman earlier, this is to the clause 1 now, the first one to be deleted, is if I heard it correctly, by doing this, both the costs and the DCs are eliminated within the core. And the only cost that would essentially be going into the DC bylaw would be for growth-related issues within the core. In my mind, and I think this is something that I would ask staff to come back with, and not even comment on it now because I think it needs a little bit more thought. That is not a large figure. And in fact, it is probably less than what it would be if we deferred, or if we gave the exemption to the DCs and they were paid by the tax base. Costs to take care of the growth in the core would be less, in my mind, than having an exemption for the DCs. I could be proven wrong. So I need to have further information on that. I think those need to be referred as well. In the case of the second one, that is part of the further study. When that comes back, and I assume it will come back, the reference in the third line to subsequent, immediately prior to subsequent development charge background study, I think we need to make sure that we define that a little bit more clearly, because there could be other amendments that are made to a DC bylaw interimly in the 5-year period. And that would probably defeat the purpose of what was intended here. So there needs to be a further definition. And number 3, I have no idea why we would not approve that at this point in time. It's regardless of what we end up with the development charge, whether it is related to a unit base or anything else. What this is saying is that we strongly encourage the region to maintain its DC exemption through the process that they are now going through. In my mind, that's absolutely critical.
I'm looking to the mover.
I will ask for them to be voted on separately, and I would strongly encourage us to include that as being approved.
I think that was the intention, actually. I was going to raise the same question, Councillor Urbanovich.
Yeah, that's certainly friendly. I mean, the only reason I didn't was because I was just trying to keep the DC stuff together. But I think that's an excellent point, Mr. Mayor, and I'm fine with including that in the core motion.
Okay. So, and the other related changes that are being suggested, I think, are part of the evolution of the incentives that we have been working on. If you go back to why the upper story was put into place, it was to try to encourage the kind of changes that have actually occurred. Without it, it probably wouldn't have happened. The facade things wouldn't have happened. And I go back to my first comment. Try to imagine what life would be like, or what it would look like in the city, both in the downtown and otherwise, without the incentives that we have had. It would not be nearly as pretty as it is today. And sorry, in the balance in the study, I think we do need to have a little bit more information, because it's obviously not going to, probably won't fly today. But I do think that we need to put our minds to this sooner than later, because our bylaw review is at the crux of all of this, and we need to give direction quickly to that study. I would be, so that, I think, maybe the first paragraph, the first clause, can come back to us sooner if we do understand what I had said at the beginning here in terms of the relative costs. That would probably change people's thinking immediately, if it is correct. But I think we need to have a timeline on this, and I can't recall if it was included in the motion or not.
There was no timeline included. Actually, why don't I just read this quickly then? So the changes here, again, it's everything except for paragraphs 2 and 3. And that paragraphs 2 and 3 be referred back to staff for further work that look at the proposed boundaries and incentive models, bringing recommendations back to council and committee for strategic planning session with a meeting in early 2014 for discussion and or decision.
2 and 3 or 1 and 2?
Well, sorry, not counting the initial line, but basically the paragraph that starts with through the development of 2014, and the one after that through the development of 2014. So those two paragraphs. The advocacy part.
We're just switching in what we were saying in terms of what was 1 and 2 and 2 and 3.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that it is just the first two operative issues.
Right. Okay.
And those are being simply deferred at this point.
Correct.
Should that be a separate motion first? Or
I would look to the mover. Would you like that?
I don't want
Sure.
it to be lost.
Okay. So just
perhaps
that
it could be wrapped up in the clauses 1 and 2 be deferred, and then approval of the rest.
Certainly, we can do that.
Thank you.
Right. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I'll try to keep my comments fairly brief if I can. I want to start out by saying that I can totally appreciate the need and the value of incentives. I know they can be very helpful, and they're required from time to time. And I should have even mentioned when the delegate was here that I agree they should have the same incentives as the rest of the community. If this were the year 2000, my thoughts would be considerably different than they are today. However, in the past 10 years, we've put a tremendous amount of money in the downtown and the immediate downtown area. I think we've done a tremendous amount for the downtown and for that being the heart of our city, for the entire city. But now, I think it's time for the dynamics of the market to take over. Another incentive in my mind that is being put into the equation is the whole LRT. I'm not being able to see that the LRT is there primarily for transportation. I think most of the arguments that I'm hearing is for development. So to me, that is a tremendous incentive that we're putting in there, and that's going to cost our taxpayers money. We can see how we're struggling with the regional budget now, and a lot of it's coming from the LRT. So, bottom line, I'm not prepared to support any further incentives. Now, I don't know that this is not living up to something. I don't know that we ever promised that these incentives were going to be in place forever. That was not the case. On the other hand, I could support if there was a quick period of getting out of the incentives. But as far as I'm concerned, the time has come to stop the incentives. And what is bothering me the most is that I go through the figures and I cannot understand why the developers are saying I'm sure they'd like the incentives, but from the figures that I'm seeing, I think they're going to get their return on the investments. So I don't know that we need to be taking taxpayer dollars to increase their return on their investment. I'm not opposed to them making a profit. I mean, that's what the private sector, that's what our capitalistic society is all about. We sure have prospered with that, and that would be ridiculous to want them to act as charitable organizations. But I think the time has come. I think we've done a great deal in this community to help, and the time has come now, as I've said, to let the dynamics of the market take over and let things work as they would, as they have in Waterloo and other areas. So I won't be supporting any of the recommendations that are before us. I would ask that you call out deal with the regional support. I guess in the interim, I need to support that, but I won't support any of the other recommendations.
Noted. Thank you. Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you very much. And I would start by agreeing with Councillor Gazzola that we do need to let the market eventually take the control of development, but we're not there yet. And certainly that's the laudable goal, and I'm happy for Waterloo that they've gotten to that point. We're at a fragile state, and we're not there yet. And I totally agree with the assessment by staff that were it not for the incentives, we would not be seeing the level of investment, success, and the brand that we've created in Kitchener. We cannot pull out the rug under this at this point. We really need to support the downtown, and the incentives are a key element of the investment. And we also need to consider our policy objectives. And Mr. Bloom alluded to what are we trying to achieve. And I think the goal in looking at extending the boundaries for the East End would be to support the East End. That if the City of Kitchener and the downtown is fragile, that's the most fragile element of the downtown. And it needs help. It needs support around the market to enable growth in that area. It's had its own unique challenges for many years, and it requires this additional level of investment. Were we not to support this extension of that boundary, I believe that it's true. We wouldn't see investment there for an additional number of years. I don't know what that number would be, but I believe that we would receive a payback on our investment by generating further confidence. If you look at City Centre, I've been told that because shovels are in the ground and that there is activity there, that there's increased interest in taking up units there. I believe the same would be the case in the East End, that if there was an anchor tenant like Fusion Homes there, that it would incent greater development and greater building in that area. It also would support the market and all the amenities in the East End. It is also a gateway, and I think that's absolutely true, and we do need to improve that aspect of our city. So in terms of LRT, yes, it will be a great incentive eventually. No, it will not be an incentive right now. We know LRT is coming in 2017, but we're not seeing that that's enough for people to plunk down their money and start building and buying in that area. So I would support the motion before us. I would also ask us to keep in mind, I'm not sure when this is coming back before us, but I would encourage the developers and Mr. Kotzeff to help us understand the business case, as has been asked by Councillor Gazzola, to understand what the numbers are, so that we have a clear understanding when we do look at this. Because I don't believe it's about padding their profit margins. I believe they do deserve a rate of return, and they believe that it's not there yet. So we have to understand what their rationale and thinking is. So my goal is to extend this not to the Green Line, but really on a one-off basis to what we can afford for the city for the extension to Betzner for this Fusion Home project. That's my simple objective. I believe the city can afford to do that. The payback would be 3.55 years, and I think it would be a good shot in the arm, as has been said, for that east end of the city. I don't believe we can support or afford a greater extension of the boundaries at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Etherington.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I'll be supporting what has been suggested, but I did want to say the my first priority has always been the downtown neighborhoods, including the East End, Cedar Hill neighborhood. And from there, the spillover, I think that's directly connected to the overall good health of the city. So I think there's a very delicate balance there when it comes to what we're dealing with here, the removal of, or non-removal of downtown incentives. And I think we have to tread very cautiously when we approach this. I don't want to mess up that development that has started to happen in the core. We've got a development engine that has been running smoothly, and I'm really concerned that if we take our feet off the gas too fast, we're going to stall that engine and see everything come to a grinding halt, with the consequent negative impacts on those neighborhoods and the city. So I'm in favor of proceeding very cautiously on this, and so I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Yaneski?
Thank you. I've been mulling this over for a while, even from the last time we had considered this back a little while ago on downtown incentive programs, and I see its benefits and I also see its, I guess, drawback to a degree. I will be prepared to support it. I think there's merit in it. I think we need some incentive in this area to continue on. I feel that maybe certain parts of the downtown could be modified because they're moving ahead quite easily and could do so without any incentives. And yet other areas of struggle is because of the character of the area, in my opinion. So I will be supporting it. I think I would like to see each paragraph of this recommendation voted on separately, because I think there's issues there that have been raised by different councillors, and I think that would be handled in that way best.
All of the 13 is, I'd really prefer, in the interest of time,
I have 9 here.
If you pick out the ones that you have concern with, I'd rather vote on those separately, but.
Well, I just thought.
We're already voting on the region, basically the advocacy one, which is the fourth one down, separately. We're voting on the 2 before that, and then the rest on balance. So already doing 4 votes.
Well, I'd want number 7, the landing pads, considered separately.
The landing pads separately? Okay.
Yes, please.
Certainly.
And that's it for now. I was just trying to take everybody's concerns and make it simpler by doing that way.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
Okay, I had some questions, but the way this is going, I can handle them with staff offline and when this comes back. The point is well taken from the CAO about the concerns regarding unit caps. Again, I'll have some significantly more questions about that, because my concern in taking both in that and in stopping the incentives now is what was brought up by Mr. Regier, is that we have 2 condo projects going on now, but it's been 12 years since the last ones came in. We have a couple of short-term wins. It's not a time to say, okay, we're done here. Having said that, I very much agree that this entire body of work has to have a very firm and clear sunset so that the incentives go away, because I do believe that the very large part of the intention of the LRT is to replace these sort of incentives. So with that, we're going to begin a somewhat complicated voting process here. We're going to start with going in the actual paragraphs, just so for simplicity, the actual paragraphs here, not the operative ones. We're going to start with the 4th one down, and that is that the mayor and staff work with the region to encourage, okay? So those in favor of that paragraph? Those in favor? In favor and opposed? Okay, I don't remember a call for a recorded vote. I don't remember a call for a recorded vote, but we can do that. Okay, just on this one or on everything? Okay. Is there a preference? Is it okay if we just stand for these? Mr. Clare, has to be recorded either way, I suppose. Sorry? Pardon me.
Through the chair, it still takes almost the equivalent amount of time because I still need to record everyone who's standing as well.
Okay, so we'll do it the normal way. If you don't mind, we're going to actually vote. It takes the same amount of time. So again, we're voting on the fourth clause down, and that's basically the advocacy part. Voting is open. Passes unanimously. We will now take, we'll take to Councillor Yaneski's concern about the landing pad and facade. We're going to take the paragraphs 7 to completion, I believe. Right, 7 to the end. So that's regarding the facade and the landing pad. The facade improvements, right. Yeah, that's what we're voting on now. You just want number 8? Okay. Okay, so we'll vote on clause number 8 then individually. Can you read that? Certainly. Can I read it?
Yeah. So that we know exactly, because I've got 7 and 8.
Right, so yeah, that's staff prepare amendments to the downtown. Okay. Okay, so we're voting on that item. Voting is open. And that passes. Okay, and next we will take Councillor Verbanovich's specific recommendation changes to the second and third paragraphs. So that is starting through the development of 2014 is the first paragraph, and the second one that through the development of 2014 with the additional parts added earlier. Is everybody clear on that? Right. And the voting on that is open. Okay, and that passes, and the balance of the report. And that is open. And that passes as well. Okay, now the next item was advertised, so my understanding is that we do have to take this item immediately. I will permit a 2-minute stand-up break, and then we're going right into the comprehensive fee review. Okay, we now will take item number 7, the 2014 Comprehensive Fee Review. We do have one delegation for this item, which we'll hear from first, Mr. Harold Druitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to stay at the 30,000-foot level. I have copies here for councillors and the clerk. And I have copies here for Ryan and the CAOs. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you that I was at least able to have lunch, and thank you for the breakdown of the meeting. That's the first time I've seen that. So that's great. That was a great help. I was able to have a working lunch. I'm multitasking even when I'm retired. Okay, sorry about the time and so on. By the time I saw that, I wasn't going to reprint it. I'm a junior senior on fixed income. Okay, here we go. The Tax Watch Group is pleased to see that the highest target for the 2014 property tax increase is 1.25%. In the survey taken during the spring-summer of 2012, 62% of respondents answered to the alternative, which stated inflationary tax increase, maintained services. The latest information I have regarding the 2013 CPI or inflation, remembering we are talking about 2014 budget, not 2013, indicates that it will most likely come in at about 1.1 to 1.3%, not the 1.3%-1.5% councillors, I think, to this point, have been given, which I think is what the province used back in the March budget. I trust you know the challenge before you. And I guess one of my purposes here is to be proactive and try and help you do our part to help you attain this target. In order to have a chance at meeting this target, even at today's session on user fee rates, you need to ask yourselves, what do we need to have for the community? What should we have? And what is nice to have? Therefore, we suggest a rate of no higher than the inflation rate for the items in the need to have category and a higher rate of at least 3% for the nice to have category. I suggest the simplest example is golf. We suggest this is in the nice to have category. We suggest a 3% increase or higher is not out of line. All the best in your deliberations. I will be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Druitz. Any questions of Mr. Druitz? Councillor Yaneski.
Thank you for coming in, Mr. Druitz. I appreciate your position on meeting the inflation rate and also for the user fees, the inflation rate of no higher than the 1% roughly, and 3% for nice to have. And use the one example of the golf enterprise. In our package, we have dozens and dozens and dozens of user fees provided, and I think the challenge would be to determine, in one opinion, what is a need and what is a nice to have. Somebody could say, yes, that's nice to have, but another person may say, I really need that because I think it's a necessity as opposed to nice to have. are there other examples, or do you think that's a reasonable scenario to take under consideration?
Thank you, Councillor, and welcome back. I read through that 52-page or whatever page document it is. Wow, I didn't realize there were so many rates. There's a lot of programs, I think, that you have for children, and I know that we have a lot of people that are in the lower middle class or the upper lower class. Not that we are a class society, but I think people know what I mean. They're trying to get ahead, and a lot of single parents with children, and I think you need to take that into consideration. One other thing that I remember, just as you were asking me the question, is I know that the Ontario government has now got some kind of fund for music and arts. There's a grant capability there, and I don't know what the rules and regulations, lines of demarcation are. But I'd like to think that as you give some funds in the previous years to these different groups, I'd like to think that you can pursue some revenue income to offset the cost. And I'd like to think that staff knows the detail on that. So I tried to answer your question. I hope I had some success.
So if we were to increase provide any increases, should it go more to the particular user, notwithstanding all those little needs and wants, as opposed to the general taxpayer who may be funding everybody else in the city because they don't take advantage of any of these programs for whatever reason, because they're not interested and still just want to be maintaining their bottom line? And so if you want to use a program, whether it's renting the ice or going swimming or whatever, you pay for it.
Basically, I've taken that stand for most of my life. I'm a firm believer in user pays, or user at least pays a reasonable share, but at the same time, I like to think on the programs where we helped society as a whole, and hopefully give a hand up to some families and so on. I think that councillors should take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there are no further questions. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Jewett.
Thank you.
I'll turn to Mr. Haggie.
Thank you, Chair Davey, members of the council. I'll be sharing today's user fee presentation with Deborah Fagerdahl. She's the manager of financial planning, so I'll make some introductory comments and then she'll be providing more details on user fees. Just to remind council, user fees come forward at this time of year as part of the budget process, and it's done at this point so that they can be implemented as of January 1st. And any delay in passing user fees would put in jeopardy being able to implement user fees by January 1st. And the 2014 budget is predicated on user fees changing on January 1st. So if it's delayed today, it would put in jeopardy the assumptions that are made in the 2014 budget and would have a negative impact on the budget. Generally, user fees are increasing by 2%. And as you go through the schedule, it's been pointed out how long it is. It is quite a number of fees, but generally things are going up around 2%. As has been mentioned, there's an option before council today to increase user fees by 3% instead of 2%, and that's outlined in the issue paper AR05, which is attached to the report. So how that would work is if council approves that today, as you're going through the user fee schedule and you see items that are increasing by 2%, give or take a little bit, those would instead go up by 3%. So if something's going up 2% or 2.05% or 1.97%, instead it would go up by about 3%. The fees that are increasing by something other than 2%, so if there's a fee that was planned to increase 5% or 10%, that would be unaffected. Likewise, if there are user fees that were to go down, you'll see as you go through the schedule, there are a few where user fees were scheduled to be reduced. Those would also be unaffected. So it's really only the user fees that are going up by 2% that would change by something else if council so chooses here today. This would, if council chose to increase the budget by 3% instead of 2% for user fees, just generally, it would generate $125,000 of additional revenue, which would be would be included in the 2014 budget. So it would reduce the starting point for the 2014 budget when we get to the operating budget in December. You'll note in the issue paper it also talks about additional allocation for leisure access card, and to the discussion that was just had with the delegation, if user fees were going up by 3%, we have the leisure access card program, which is meant to deal with affordability issues. And so the issue paper outlines that if user fees go up 3%, that would generate $125,000, but then there would be $10,000 of that taken and provided to the leisure access card program to deal with affordability issues. So that ends my opening comments, and Ms. Fagerdahl will take the balance of the presentation.
Very good. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Charging user fees is a common practice used by municipalities to mitigate the impact on the tax base. Generally, these fees are charged for those services where the consumers would have a choice on whether or not they use those services. In setting the rate fees, staff consider cost recovery, legislative requirements, the fees charged by other municipalities and like service providers, and overall market conditions. In the body of the report, staff have highlighted the fees that have changed by something other than the 2% guidelines mentioned. This year, fees have also been rounded to the nearest 5 cents due to the elimination of the penny. This rounding has been done in accordance with CRA guidelines. This has caused more variations to the 2% increase guideline than we normally would expect. Most of the fee changes highlighted in the report apply to a group of fees such as community program and services or aquatic fees. But there are some individual fees that have also been highlighted, such as the marriage licensing fees as well as the tempered meter fees. Attached to the report is also the aforementioned 53-page detailed schedule, and this format is much the same as it was last year. The details included highlight 2013 rate, the 2014 rate, the proposed percentage increase of those rates, and commentary where applicable. All new fees for 2014 have also been highlighted. And this concludes the overview for the 2014 user fees.
Very good, thank you. We'll go to questions. First, I have Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I have a number of questions, but I'm going to leave them and correspond with you for the answers. I would like to move ahead here. I would like to actually put the motion on the table. I spent several hours going through all the detail, and there's nothing earth-shattering as far as I'm concerned. I do have questions that I will ask staff and share with the rest of council, but I just think I'd like to see if we can move up and catch up a little bit of time.
Yeah, I think to catch up time, that would be great. So if you want to, we won't table the motion just yet, but if you want to tell us what the motion was.
Yeah, I will move, and I'd like to make a little comment then because of that. I would like to move the option 2 where we go with the 3% increase, and that takes into account the additional funding for the people that need assistance. Okay, now just a little comment. Generally speaking, I'd like to see us stay within increase in the cost of living. This is a little bit higher, but I'm prepared to do it because I think people do have an opportunity. They do have a choice when it comes to these types of programs, where they don't when it comes, if it's left into the tax base. So by doing that little amount, I don't think it makes very much difference on each of the individual fees, and yet it does help our tax levy a little bit. Another point that to refer to it actually is that we do get involved with children's activities and whatnot, and these under current income tax legislation, people can now make a claim for amounts that children do spend on recreational activities and artistic activities. So there is a benefit there to that to sort of compensate for our slight increase. So I'd move that. I'll forego my questions and would encourage council to support the recommendation. Thank you.
out of order, but I appreciate it in the terms of time. So with that in mind, folks, Councillor Glenn Graham.
I will support that motion. I agree with the rationale. I do have a couple of questions. In terms of the wedding license fees for Cambridge and Waterloo, where are we? Because I've heard some comments that we're higher and other people are traveling to those municipalities. So I'm just a little concerned about that.
Actually, the report speaks that on page 7.5, the marriage license fee. Looks like it's increasing by only 0.68%.
I understand that, but I'm just trying to make it relative to Cambridge and Waterloo.
Oh, I see, okay.
Through you, Chair, I don't believe at this moment that we have concrete numbers from Cambridge and Waterloo. So the numbers that we based ours on were just what we were speculating from those particular councils at the time that we recommended these particular figures.
Okay.
But it is in line with everything that they've been doing, so we've been trying to remain competitive.
Thank you. The second question is about the threshold for the leisure access card. I was wondering if that information could be brought back or sent to us before the next council meeting so that we can consider whether that's the appropriate threshold or whether it could be increased. I don't need it today, but I would like to understand that. I understand that the economy is changing and shifting and there's people losing jobs, and if we're looking at a 3% increase, we may look to, if we're only spending 10,000 of that 125,000, there's some opportunity there to perhaps benefit some other people. So,
okay. Mr. May could comment on that.
Yes.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, we'd be happy to send the detailed information around to Council. What I can confirm is that we've looked at the numbers and feel confident that over the next couple of years, we have a plan that we can put in place through increases such as the one you're considering today that will get it to a sustainable level. But we'll certainly circulate those details.
So that big picture would be helpful. So thank you very much. And if we could at the same time just have information on the wedding licenses for Cambridge and Waterloo before the next council, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. I am going to take the liberty to ask a few questions because before I can approve the motion, I can understand a couple of things. So going straight to my questions on 7-21, item 473, research processing charge. This is under cemetery cremation interment charges. It says that it's a new charge. Fee based on cost recovery. So just help me understand what that is, please. It's line 473.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. That is a new charge that we've implemented because what we're finding is that with our older properties, such as Mount Hope, there's been an increased interest in families wanting to have cremated remains buried on family lots. But the problem it creates for us is that we spend a lot of time doing a lot of historical research, making sure who the proper owner is. A lot of times they're deceased, so we have to go back and check and make sure that we're authorizing the correct people to be interred on that lot. So we decided that we were going to start charging families for that. It's an actual cost for the time that we spend making sure that we can permit these cremated remains to be buried on these family lots.
Okay, thanks, Lorelei. So that makes it clear for me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so, and then going quickly to page 7-28, under fire prevention request for inspections. There's everything from 800 down to 809, I guess. I just wanted, are these mandatory inspections? Or are they discretionary?
On 800, 809, through you, Mr. Chair, the inspections, it says they're either request inspections or discretionary inspections for commercial or residential properties. So anything that we're legally bound to do, such as complaints or certain types of requests, cannot be charged for under legislation. These would be all the inspections, real estate transaction type inspections, licensing type inspections, things like that that would be required by the homeowner, but not necessarily legislative through our Fire Protection Prevention Act.
Okay, so these are above and beyond what would be legislated.
Correct.
Okay. All right, that's good. Thank you. On to new home signs on page 7-33, line item number 900. Just a quick question about, do we charge if the sign stays up longer than is allowed? Do we have an additional charge, or does that fall under bylaw, or how does that?
Okay, through you, Mr. Chairman, a sign is for 1 year, and that sign has to be renewed. What we are proposing here is actually a reduction for the renewal because there is a lesser effort involved on our part. That is something that's brought to our attention, and we did agree. So a renewal still needs to be renewed, but we are charging a lesser fee than for a first-time sign application.
Okay, so but if they don't renew and the sign remains, do we charge them if they've gone past that year? Is there a fee that's charged to them, or a?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, our standard approach to that is actually to remind them that they need to renew their sign fee.
Okay, all right, thank you. Condominium conversion on page 7-34, line 942. Application fee for condominium conversion. I just was trying to understand, I guess, is it an application that a builder has made? So he started off with an apartment rental unit and then converted it to a condo, and this is their fee that they have to pay to do that conversion?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Okay. Is there any way that we monitor this to know if a unit has been built as a rental property and is now converted to a condo, but they do not fulfill this conversion fee or this process?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, they actually require the payment of the fee in order to get the approval that they're trying to secure. They actually need that approval in order to change the form of tenure. So it's in their best interest to actually stick with it.
Okay, great. Thank you. And almost there, guys. Okay, so down to building permits on 7-40, line 1154. And just to need a little bit of understanding on how that is decided, and is that cost recovery?
Mr. Chapman?
This is not. Through the chair, this is in the legal area, so those are applications for encroachment agreements. My understanding is that all of these fees are based on cost recovery for legal's time.
Oh, okay, thank you. I forgot to mention that. Thank you. Line 1168, minor variance. I guess just my comment is considering how much time it takes for staff to be working on these kind of things, I'm wondering if it should actually be a little bit higher. Well, I don't know if, just take that into consideration, I suppose. I think that staff spends a lot of time on variances. 7-43, line 1264, pet shop licensing. What happens if you find out that somebody is selling pet food and pet supplies out of their garage instead of an actual stand-alone commercial building? Is that in contravention of this licensing fee?
Mr. Chapman?
It sounds like that's a specific situation, and so perhaps we can follow up offline and look into the details and respond to you that way.
Okay, I heard about this a year ago, but I just when I saw this, it raised it to my mind again. But okay, then that would be great if we can talk about that offline. And sorry. I thought there was something here on lodging house fees that I am now missing. Maybe Mr. Turner can come down for just half a second to indulge me. Since we're talking about fees, one of the fees that we haven't actually gone any further, well, I guess it does go back to page 7-34, zone change, public notice of advertisement, OPA, condo conversions. I'm wondering if the whole discussion around rental licensing bylaw would have fallen under these licensing provisions.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I haven't had a chance to really consider that. I would think that any fees that would come out of a rental licensing fee would be captured by the fee schedule that's currently mandated and monitored by the licensing office. I'm not exactly sure how the zone change stuff would play into it, but I could certainly have an offline conversation with you.
Okay, and I'm just going to beg Council's indulgence for 1 minute because this was something I wanted to do when I unfortunately had to be away. One of the questions I wanted to ask you at that time, and it just sort of is timely because this is user fees, is can you give me or Council a sense, and maybe it would be better to come back in some kind of a report, what we have actually been paying out in our bylaw costs and number of hours that our staff has had to dedicate to monitoring the Conestoga College, Lower Dune, Green Valley Drive area. And if you can also maybe give us some idea of what kind of infractions we've had in terms of parking, party behavior, that kind of thing. I know we discussed this in our strategy back in June, and I guess what I'm kind of concerned about is that we are doing security essentially for the landlords of this area, okay, right?
Councillor Fernandez, it's a valid point, but in the context of dozens of line items, we can't get this specific on each individual line item. I would encourage, actually, I would ask that you please withdraw that question. We're getting way behind, and we're getting into too much detail on literally thousands of line items. I can't offer that same freedom to every member of council, so I can't offer it to you as well. Well, this puts me in a bit of a quandary because I know that staff is willing to prepare a report. I've had discussion with them. It's time sensitive, and I don't want to really be pushing them into late December. So I would appreciate your latitude on just making the request. Time sensitive to the user fees?
Time sensitive to the budget.
Okay. If you can tie your question into how it relates to user fees, I'll accept it. I guess that's my...
I guess it's related to licensing and licensing fees.
So the intention is to possibly raise user fees
related to licensing and how it would tie in with, if we were to consider bylaw rental licensing fees, how that would tie into the fees that I was looking at here.
Okay. This report needs to be approved today. So what you're talking about sounds like a body of work that wouldn't be able to be approved in time for this. So it would be a separate item that would be looked at. And I don't think this is the appropriate forum to bring that forward. I agree. I mean, it's something that needs to be looked at. But this, again, we're focusing on.
So if I just make the request of staff to see if they can come back with a report before we get into our operation budget, is that a reasonable request?
I would look to staff to comment whether that's something that can be done individually or whether that require motion.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to answer that question.
Okay.
What I would believe, the time would be tight to come back to the next committee meeting, which is in December, but we certainly can't have all the information together with a report that would be tabled in January, approximately 2 weeks before final budget day.
Okay, that would be fine. That'd be great.
Okay. But
Thank
to be
you.
clear, too, we need to approve this today to not have those.
That's right, and I understand that. I just that this was the time that I needed to ask this question regarding licensing fees and fees.
Sure.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
I guess the questions I have is, I just want one piece of clarification from the Councillor Gazzola's motion. Did he say he wanted to increase it 1% more? Is that what?
To 3%, yes.
3%, okay. I'll make my comments when the time is appropriate.
Okay. Thank you.
But the questions I have are relating to items on engineering in 7-49 and I guess 7-50. I've been hearing a lot of rumblings in the development community about out of line engineering fees, and I'm looking at some of these fees here. They're kind of suggesting that, and I'm just wanting to get a little better explanation as to why these are here.
Through the chair, would you have specific line items that you can refer to?
Well, I guess from these are all, I guess, fees to be held. Like to me, that doesn't make any sense to me why these fees are being held.
Okay, I believe I know the question. It's regarding line 1428 and down. What those are fees for the installation of sanitary and water services. What is happening is that we're allowing the private sector to do the installation. What we need is a basis on which to retain the amount that is estimated for that work so that we can guarantee that the work is done. We also require an amount to administer the installation and inspection. So what we're saying is that we would ask the developers to pay, for instance, on a 2-lane road, $10,000. The $10,000 would be held to ensure that the work is done. The developers would then go out, get quotes, get the work installed, pay for that work, and as long as we're guaranteed that the work has been paid for and that the work has been done properly, we release the $10,000 minus a 10% administration fee.
Okay, so I guess my question is, when someone comes to their engineering office and they go about this privately to do these quotes, are they not getting quotes from engineered approved firms?
The firms that would be quoting, and perhaps Linda can clarify that process.
Pardon me?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're changing the current off-site works process. So that's a process that anyone has to follow who wants to do work within the right-of-way. Currently, our process requires us to obtain 3 contractor quotes to complete that work. And then, as Hans mentioned, that quote is held essentially as a guarantee for a 2-year maintenance period until that work's accepted on the city's behalf. We're moving to a new process where we won't require those 3 contractor quotes. These quotes, the prices that are before you, they'll form a basis of a standardized fee. So we'll go off those fees, and then those will still be held for the 2-year maintenance period. 50% will be refunded as soon as construction's completed, and then the other 50% will be held after the 2-year maintenance period's done. So all the amount will be fully refunded minus the 10% admin fee.
Okay, so when we're looking at these developments, I mean these fees that are being held, are they being held for certain type of developments, or this is all across the board?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we take these fees on any work that's being done in the right-of-way. So whether it's servicing, concrete work for a new sidewalk, any type of work that's done.
Okay. So in theory, let's say an individual resident bought a property somewhere in the central neighborhoods, and what type of fees would they be looking at if they were to build a house of their dreams? Because to me, I think there's probably a number of line items here that would suggest somewhere in the $50,000 range for someone who just wants to build a dream home and hold those in lieu, it seems a little outrageous to me.
Mr. Chair, if it's a new home, those fees are counted in the plan of subdivision. So these fees are just based on new services provided. So if an existing residential development was on septic, say, and they wanted to come off septic and get a sanitary connection, then these fees would be applied. But if it's a new build, it would be under a plan of subdivision, so they wouldn't be paying for these fees.
So, but I'm talking about central neighborhoods. I'm not talking about greenfield developments.
Sorry, okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Normally, a site actually it will cost about $50,000. You are correct, but our main focus here is when a site plan actually comes in for an off-site work process, we are proposing to use the cost estimate actually shown in the sheet to calculate the fees, so that once the developer can use any contractor on the street, and we don't need to go after the contractor because we have the fair amount of guarantee with the city. If the work is not done properly, we can use these funds to rectify it. So normally a service connection actually finish within a month or two. As soon as actually that finish, we will reduce 50% of the letter of credit. And the 50% actually will be kept with us, because most of the time we see there is potholes in the street, the curb actually broken, and sometimes the contractor may not actually come back and repair it. So at the time, city has to hire a contractor. That's going to be a big cost towards the project.
Okay. I don't disagree with holding some funds in lieu. It just seems a little exuberant amount of funds for someone who's just an ordinary citizen wanting to build a new home in a central neighborhood. And to me, these go all against everything that we've been discussing here in the Horseshoe with KEDS and everything else, infill, and wanting to promote downtown. To me, was there even any industry discussion?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, actually we took this report to Waterloo Home Builders Association, and we got their support to moving forward with this process. And especially these rates are actually in line with our tender documentation. We actually reviewed last 3-year cost to come up with this cost estimate. And the industry is actually well supported this process. Thank you.
I would like to prepare an amendment. I want to have these items deferred because I want to see a little more further discussion. I want to see the rationale on why these are here and have a full detailed report.
I have a point of order. Okay. Sorry, point of order. Councillor Fernandez.
I'm sorry, Councillor Ioannidis has declared a conflict in our previous discussions because he owns property in downtown. Now he's speaking about engineering costs that may reflect and impact downtown infill. I'm not quite sure why you would be discussing that if you've already declared a pecuniary interest in the previous discussions. I think you may be recusing yourself from that at this point in time.
I'm sorry, I don't have a conflict
That's not actually a valid point of order. That's up to Councillor Ioannidis to make a decision on. So sorry, Councillor Ioannidis, you wanted to, you would defer items.
The ones more though what I'm concerned about are the ones held in lieu. So I just think they're a little too I think they're a little too high.
So
like I don't have an issue with holding funds with lieu to keep developers who are actually abusing it in line. That makes sense, but I think if it's for the average ordinary citizen who's buying an inner property, I'm a little concerned that holding somewhere between the 50,000 range is a little extreme.
Okay, and that, sorry, just for clarification though, when we're voting on it, so that it looks like it's items
1429 to 1457.
1457. Okay. Moving along, finished the question?
Yeah.
Councillor Etherington?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think maybe Mr. May can answer the bulk of my questions, perhaps in the report coming back. I'm very interested in the leisure access card. I just wanted to make sure that when that comes to us, can he include the number of people benefiting from that program, the number of children, the number of seniors? And I wanted to know specifically, and maybe you could answer that now, did we overspend on this program in the past year, in this year?
Mr. May?
That's right.
Hi, through the chair. Just to answer the question, this year our budget for 2013 was $123,921. Excuse me. Like running down the stairs here. And I just ran a report this morning.
You're supposed to puff going up the stairs, not coming down the stairs.
I didn't hear that. And our total expenditures for 2013 was $153,390. So the answer to your question is yes.
And that seems to be every year this is happening. Yeah, yes. Thank you. My other question was, did we ever refuse assistance because of that? Because we were over budget?
We haven't done that in my time here, no.
Okay. That's good to hear.
Okay.
In light of the fact that the things like the Jumpstart program could be reducing their support, do you think $10,000 is increase this year is enough to cope with that?
Mr. May?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as I mentioned earlier, and we will circulate the data, staff have looked pretty closely at this and believe that if we have similar increases as to what's being proposed this year, over the next 2 or 3 years, we can ramp up funding to a sustainable level. In the meantime, we have identified some capital accounts which have not previously been closed out that could go to fund any over expenditures in the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you very much. And one last question, nothing to do with leisure access, but I went through this line by line. I may have missed it from crawling around the floor with my new granddaughter, but could someone tell me if there is a fee charge, perhaps in Victoria Park, for example, when festivals and events damage the park? Is there a set fee that we charge for that kind of item?
Who could speak to that?
These are special events that often the city is left with damage to clean up.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we do not have a defined fee for that. What we have done in the past is indicated to the operator that they are to reimburse us for the actual cost. But that's always been a bit of a challenge.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Webb. And I won't be voting in favour of the 3%. I'll throw that in now, but I'd certainly vote in favour of the lesser amount.
Thank you. Councillor Galloway-Sealock.
Yeah, a lot of my questions have been asked. My focus right now is really on the special events section with respect to 63 to, I didn't even mark them all off, but close to the end of 70. And I'm just curious as to what type of events, or if this is purely just kind of all the new charges is what I'm looking at. Is this purely more of a business base where we're going to rent them out, or is this to existing events that we hold or people who use our space? What type of events are we going to be charging these fees to?
Mr. Aguirre?
Through you, Chair Davey. This is these are services which we've provided in the past to our existing event portfolio. So essentially any event that would normally come through the city events program, it can be a small one or a large one. We're just asking to establish for the first time a rental framework to allow us. We have been charging back some of these costs, but we haven't had a standard framework for doing so.
Okay, my concern then would be by charging more potentially to events, and because we support a lot of our events in our grant system, will we end up having to increase our grant budget in order to cover off these costs? So we do a lot of in-kind, or we give grant money to different organizations who hold the events within the city. Will we see those asks increase because we're going to be increasing our fees?
Most of the events that we have had now have either incorporated these costs directly through by going out to other vendors to purchase the service, the rental service, or we've negotiated some separate cost or fee that reflects the actual cost of the rental to the city. But most of it's been done separately. So I actually don't think that there will be much of an impact on the grant. I could be wrong, and I'll ask for clarification from Jeff Young on that one.
Yeah, I think that's really important because everyone's got their costing for their events probably already set up, and if we're all of a sudden going to start to ask for more money to cover off some of these costs, I think we could just be having to find it somewhere else, and that's a concern of mine with regards to especially some of the pieces that are new that we're going to be charging for. So that, I believe, is my only question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Rabinovich.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair Davey. A few questions. First of all, on the based on the proposed motion from Councillor Gazzola, on things like our, in particular, the fees associated with our arenas and with our fields, because many of those are subsidized by the city, will it require if we increase the fees by a larger percentage, will it require a higher level of subsidy, which will then get added on through the operating budgets?
Through the chair, to the extent that any of those fees were increasing by 2%, if they would then go up by 3%, so they would have higher costs. And I guess if the intent is to stay neutral, then there would be an increased cost to those.
Because there's a correlation between the level of subsidy and the fee paid, correct?
Right. The other option is for council to pass a motion to specifically exclude those types.
Okay. And just further to Councillor Galloway-Seelock's questions on the special event stuff, I guess what I'm struggling with here is the last part, and I'm not sure if I understood your response, Mr. Regier, on the chargebacks. Will we not be seeing organizations coming to us for more money? So, for example, I think of some of the special events out in the square right now that we do with community groups. If they involve 10 by 10 tents, and many of those events are subsidized right now, if for the city fees, if all of a sudden we start asking for 10 tents at $130, that's $1,300. Are they now going to be coming and asking us for a larger grant of another $1,300?
Mr. Regier.
Through you, Chair Davey, I've sent that question to Jeff Young, who's our manager of special events, and hope to have an answer shortly. It's possible, but my understanding is that the current practice is for all of those smaller events to rent their own equipment up to this point. This will simply these rental rates are not out of line with current industry standards, and so this will simply streamline the process of providing that equipment through an on-site inventory rather than having them going off-site to rent the equipment. But I could be wrong on that. So, and there may be one or two events which do have additional costs. Whether or not they come to us for a grant to offset those costs, of course, is a matter for them to to determine. But I'll let me clarify that with Jeff and get back to you.
Okay. And what level of dialogue have we had with our regular clients that work with us at City Hall on these types of events in terms of these new fees? And have we had their input?
As I understand it, we're actually responding to demand here, where people are saying, "Can you provide this equipment?" And rather than having us running out to off-site to get it, so I think that this is largely a response to our clients asking for support.
Okay, I guess before I'm personally willing to support these in finality, I'd like to see maybe Jeff come here so we can get some detail on some of these, because it does concern me that it may be counterintuitive to what we're trying to do in terms of animating the square and the downtown. On the motion, Mr. Chair, I'd like to propose an amendment. I don't know if it will be friendly. But I can support Councillor Gazzola's motion of 3%, other than on fees that are related to our recreational programs. I think it's extremely important that we continue to keep our recreational programs for the health of our citizens as reasonably affordable as possible. I think it's more than reasonable to keep those at 2%, or what's proposed on the sheets in front of us. I think to go higher than that is counterproductive in terms of what we're hearing from all orders of government talking about citizen health, and I think it would be prudent on us to keep those fees as they're reflected here. So I'll either ask if that's a friendly amendment, or so I'm talking about swim fees, skating fees, all those recreational kind of programs. And if it's not friendly, I'll make an amendment.
I think the obvious question before we even ask that is, does staff have an idea what the financial implications of that are?
Through you, Mr. Chair, not off the top of our heads. We'd be able to go back. We should be able to have an answer to that before the council meeting next Monday. But I don't think we'd be able to get that in very short order.
Okay, very good.
Is it friendly?
Well, actually, it's not even tabled yet, so we'll get to that in just a moment. I'm just going to continue the line of questioning. Mayor Zers.
Thank you. I would be in favor of the suggestion that Councillor Urbanovich has brought forward. I think it's interesting that we talk about trying to keep things at the rate of inflation, and that, yes, some of these things are discretionary. However, the 3% is roughly, pick your figure, 2.5 to 3%, 2.5 to 3 times the rate of inflation. It's okay in some cases, but not in another. I object to that, and I think that in this case, I would support the 2%, which even that is slightly higher than the rate of inflation. Actually, it's double the rate of inflation. It's not just slightly. 3% is more than slightly, or a little bit more. And so I would support the amendment, and I would suggest that there were questions related to the tents thing that we want to have Jeff Young talk to, and also the questions that Councillor Ioannidis raised could be dealt with and provided as information for the council meeting next Monday night, when these fees will be ratified, and so that we could deal with them today in their entirety, and subject to the information that comes forward on November this week for ratification November the 25th.
Okay.
I think, because the reason I'm suggesting the 2% rather than the 3%, it affects individuals. Yes, there's a choice, but you take a look at what they are really covering and who's making taking advantage of those. I think it's more punitive than we should be engaging in.
Okay, to Councillor Gazzola for the motion was 3%, and if you could
I see the re-election campaign has started. I had a whole bunch of questions that I forwent at 1 o'clock, and I'll leave them go. I'm not going to bring them back. As far as the amendment is fine. I spent 2 hours sitting in my chair, not my hands and knees, going over all of these things, and the difference between 2 and 3% is very minimal, I think, when the figures come back. In order to just let's keep moving on this, I will accept the amendment as friendly. It's, I'm really pleased to hear the fiscal responsibility that's coming out of everybody today, and wanting to get down to what the cost of living is. I thought I gave a good reason for it. That first, it is so minimal, and secondly, it is something that people do have an opportunity to take advantage of. So, to keep moving, I'll accept. I like a recorded vote on it, and I will accept the amendment. All the amendments. Throw out all the amendments that you want. Let's keep moving forward.
Okay. Very good. And Councillor Ioannidis, your
okay. I wasn't too sure on your on Mayor Zair's amendment, because he kind of or
yeah.
I'm just suggesting that they can be approved today, because they're not ratified until next Monday. The information you're requesting, likewise that Councillor Vrbanovich was requesting, comes forward in an information package to us.
Okay.
An email.
So in other words, you can either bring forward your motion or you can defer it till Monday. That was probably either or.
I would like to see the item that I brought forward at least somewhat have the ability to have a little more industry discussion on that, because it just, I think 1 week is not enough time. Maybe by the end of the year, or even the beginning of next year. Well, by the end of the year. By the end of the year. I don't know what the dates are. I don't have my calendar, but.
Again, that's your prerogative. I would suggest, Mayor Zair, I would suggest getting some more information from staff for Monday. And if you're still not convinced, then you can obviously.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. And I just want another bit of a clarification on Councillor Vrbanovich's amendment. Is you agree with the 3% increase? Is that what you're saying? Or except for the
Councillor Vrbanovich, if you don't mind, who you see, he agrees.
I must have wax in my ears.
No,
I can't hear him.
Agrees with Councillor Gazzola's motion, except for community, all community services, not to bump those up by 3%, to keep those at the 2%. And we don't know what the financial implications of that are. It's going to come back to us before Monday.
Councillor Davey, just to be clear, it's not all of those fees. It's the ones that are program-related ones. So, rink time, swimming time, all that kind of stuff, but not, other fees that are part of community services. So room rentals would still go up.
Okay, so some clarification then, if I could, Mr. Chapman, 1 second. So, for example, swimming lessons wouldn't see the increase, but free swimming day to go and swim for the day would?
No. Anything that's recreation related would not, but a room rental is also part of community services. So is cemetery fees, so is a number of other things that are community services. That's why I was just correcting you.
Okay. Recreation items. Mr. Chapman.
And just one point of further clarification, did we understand that to be youth recreation or all recreation?
All recreation.
Well, can I make my comments then?
Please.
I'm not prepared to support that motion. I think when we come around budget time, the magic number that's always being thrown around is being within the rate of inflation, and this is going up to 3%. And I know it's a small amount and it's user fee based, but I think I would like to stick to the principle of maintaining that it's within, at least close within the rate of inflation, and by going up to 3%, I can't support that.
Okay, I'm seeing no further questions or comments. Councillor Yaneski?
I thought you were dealing with questions. Now you're doing comments?
Yeah, comments.
Okay. I didn't have any questions in regard to the report. Nothing jumped out at me as being of any serious concern. However, I'm not prepared to support the motion and as amended for 3%. I'm prepared to leave it as 2%, and even that is over the rate of inflation. I thought when we came in here in the budget time process back a while ago to provide direction, it was rate of inflation and maybe user fee at the most was 2%. So even though Councillor Gazzola's amendment to motion to have a 3% and maybe have minimal impact, I still think that the principle that we had set forward should be maintained. So I'm not prepared to support it, but support 2% overall.
Councillor Gallery-Seelock?
I'll make my comments pretty brief. I'm willing to support the recommendation, and I have in the last number of years supported the increase in user fees in order to reduce the tax levy as one way to reduce the tax levy for the taxpayers. And I think it's interesting right now just to see some of the comments that are coming up, because the inconsistencies that from the people around this table, one year you'll support it and the next year you won't support increased user fees beyond the increase from 2 to 3%, because we did the exact same thing last year. So I'm just confused as to some of the comments and the consistency. So for myself, I'm going to be consistent and will support the increase to 3%, and I will support the amendment for recreation. I understand that that's important to continue to be affordable for the members of our community, and also by doing that, it should also help reduce the impact on the leisure access card if we only increase the recreation user fees by 2%. So that'll hopefully help line some of that up as well. So I also do think it's really important that we continue to provide funding in our leisure access card. So I will support the recommendation or the motions that are on the floor.
Okay, I'm seeing no further comments. Yeah, I will support it as well. It's simple for me. It's some people claim you're saving money when you do this. You're not really saving money. You're just charging a smaller percent of the population. The difference, as was highlighted by Councillor Gazzola, is there's choice here. It's we're not hitting the people that are fighting tax increases the most, the single people or families in their homes, because they can choose whether or not to participate in more recreational activity. Well, and this is not in recreational activities in this case, but in building permits and the other fees that are on here. It's not the most palatable thing in the world to do, but the reason I'm comfortable with it is simply because we do have the leisure access program in place, and those that do want to participate, that are at the absolute bottom rung in terms of their finances, can access that program and still be part of all the recreational opportunities. Councillor Gazzola, you had
question of clarification.
Yes.
Okay? By accepting the amendment, does that mean that my original motion is dead, or can it come back? Can it keep coming back?
No, it's not dead. It can come back.
Okay.
Okay. So everyone clear on the motion? Okay. I was waiting for a recorded vote to be called. This is the amended motion. And that carries. Okay, we will now, is there any questions? And there's discussion items. I'd encourage folks to be brief. Councillor Fernandez on the discussion items, or the information items.
Yeah, sorry, information 1F2-1, that was my request regarding the hiring of senior management. Although this report says that we, as council, may elect to discuss any hirings above Job 13. That's never happened in the 3 years that I've been here, so I'm a little bit puzzled about that. I think that we definitely need to have some input on this. It needs to be brought forward to council. This can be a significant cost in our operations when we're hiring staff. especially if you're looking at anything that's in the sunshine list.
Okay.
So does that need a motion? What do I need for this?
Sir, what exactly are you asking?
Well, essentially, I had made this request a number of weeks ago, right? So I just want to know, what do we need to amend the council policy of 11-130, where it already states council may elect to discuss the recommendations to hire staff at job grade 13 and above. Senior management has indicated that plans to hire at this level are currently communicated to council and are not limited. I realize we are informed when a staff person is hired or the plan, but I have not had the ability, nor I don't believe any else on council has the ability to have input.
Mr. Wilmer.
Through the chair, essentially what the report is saying is there's a conflict between the CAO bylaw and the policy cited. And we take it, because the bylaw is a bylaw, not a policy, and because it's more recent than the policy, that it prevails. Because there's a conflict, I think for council to be clear with us as staff, we should put the question to you as to which one do you want to take? And right now, your most recent action is the bylaw.
And the bylaw says?
That's within staff's purview to make these hiring decisions. Council's purview is the overall budget and the overall headcount.
Okay.
Okay, sir, if I can interject 1 second, just for clarification, but staff still needs to notify council.
To maintain the spirit of the policy, yes. I guess to be quite clear, though, there is this conflict, and it doesn't really make sense for us to notify you if at the end of the day we may or may not receive your advice. It frankly puts me in a difficult position if you say you don't like it, and I'm saying, well, I'm empowered to do it, I'm going to do it anyway, putting my job on the line. So I'd rather we be clear with each other.
Okay. Back to you, Councillor Fernandez.
I think that maybe this needs a little bit more discussion. I think we're all kind of feeling a little bit stressed for time. And is it possible for maybe us to defer to another opportunity to have a bit more fruitful discussion around the conflict between the policy and the bylaw?
I would suggest that since there isn't a recommendation, I think, before us, there's no need for a deferral. You can just simply bring it up at a later time, if you so choose.
Okay, I just don't want to be bringing it up again and again with due respect to staff's time and to council's time. But
okay. I'm just saying there isn't necessarily a deferral required. But
okay. I will raise it again then in the new year.
Okay, very good. And Councillor Gazzola?
I have a question on the insurance business. Somewhere I read where our premiums were going to go up 9 3/4%. That was in one of the pages. Now, come to think of it, it's a May 31 year end. Is that right? So we've already faced that, a good part of that 9 3/4% already.
To speak to that, Mr. Chapman.
Through the chair, yes, you have, and what you'll see in the capital package is that our insurance reserve is in a deficit position, and a part of the reason for that is escalating insurance premiums, so it's something that we do need to be addressing.
What are we looking at in the coming year? Now, the other point I noticed was that the fees that we pay to our main carrier, who is Cowan, I guess, only went up 1.8%. How does that equate? I can leave this with you, okay? It really reflects to where we're going down the road. But in one place it said, that our fees are going up almost 10%, and yet our main insurer's fees were only going up 2%. Does that mean that we've had a abnormally high amount of incidences in Kitchener as opposed to the other area municipalities, or what does it mean?
It is a function of the allocation of the levy, and it can be a function of our claims history or very positive claims history in the other municipalities. And if you think back, there were a number of fires in the townships a few years ago, which increased their premiums for a time, and we're now seeing their premiums go down. Yeah. Certainly, I'm happy to talk with you offline or bring back further information on that, but you are correct. It really is largely a function of claims experience impacting a levy allocation averaged out over time.
Okay, that's fine, and perhaps if it's of interest, you can circulate it to council, to all of council. Thank you.
Mayor Zare?
I'm just ready to go.